This conference will now be recorded.
Hello everyone, welcome to day 6 in our GCP Cloud Architect training. So where we are going to start our third module, which is basically on compute, the various compute options which we are going to get in GCP, right from infrastructure as a code, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, function as a service, all those things is what we are going to see, container as a service, all the popular options we are going to see in this module. Let's get started. So the various compute options which you can get, forget about GCP, in general which you get usually is you start with on-premise. So where you may have a virtualized environment or you may have a bare metal. So if you have a bare metal, what you can run on that is going to be limited because it's bare metals. So in very simple terms, if people are coming from a non-infrastructure background, a simple example is a laptop. So if you have a laptop, what you can run basically is one OS. Maybe if you go little deeper, you can do dual boot, all those kinds of stuffs. But it's limited is there. So usually what you do is you install something called as a type 2 hypervisor. On top of your OS, you install a hypervisor like VirtualBox, VMware player kind of a stuff so that you can have multiple OS to try out certain things. In virtualized environment, so you're going to use vSphere kind of stuffs where you can virtualize. It's basically vSphere is going to be a type 1 hypervisor on top of the bare metal. You install this hypervisor, then you have different OS, basically Windows, Linux, all those things. That's what people do it in on-prem. So the drawback of on-prem there is you need to have a data center. A real estate has to be there, electricity should be there, aircon should be there so that you can maintain the temperature for those devices. Because even if our laptops, if you see, if we run continuously for some hours, it gets heated up. So you have to have a better cooling stuff. So there are lots of capital expenditure which you have to spend when it comes to on-premise. So that's where people started slowly moving to cloud, where almost like zero capital expenditure, only you will have an operational expenditure. So you are going to have some operational expenditure, basically like patching the system, all those kind of stuffs. So that's your on-premise, which we are not going to discuss in our class. Towards the end of our training, module 9, we are going to talk about migration from such kind of a system to GCP, but we will not do much about on-premise, and we don't have an on-premise system. And the other extreme is basically software as a service. So our Microsoft 365, Google Drive, the G Suite stuffs which you see, these are all SaaS offerings. So we don't know where the data gets stored, how it's processed, all those things. We just use it, that's it. So in between them is what we are going to use most of the things in our class. So if you don't want to have a capital expenditure, basically you're going to use the closest one in cloud is going to be ISaaS, infrastructure as a service. So here the underlying infrastructure is going to be abstract, or the underlying hardware, to be very specific, is going to be abstracted from us. So we don't need to worry whether it's running Intel Skylake or it is running AMD. If you want, you can get the details, but you don't need to worry much about it. What's the underlying networking switch? All those details you don't need to worry. Your focus is only on what kind of OS I want, whether I need a Windows OS, whether I need a Linux OS. In Linux, what kind of distribution I should go. And once I have installed a provisioned OS, what kind of softwares I should install. Should I install Python? Should I install a database or something else? That should be your focus when you're using infrastructure as a service. So the underlying hardware is totally abstracted. Uh, so this is a standard service model which you get in cloud, any cloud, infrastructure as a service. So the equivalent of that in GCP is called as compute engine, Google Compute Engine, GCE. That's what they call. Uh, so a simple example, if you were to give, if you are very new to the cloud and you want to get a small analogy, I can treat this as my own car. So treat this as your own car. You want to commute from your home to office or from back from office to home. Assume the medium which you take is your own car. So if it's your own car, you have a greater control. So you can have the car of your choice. You can have the car of your choice. The seat, the leather which the seat is made of, you can choose that. It's your control. You can have the air con inside the car to a temperature of your choice. You can play a music of your choice. You can refuel your petrol in the petrol station or the diesel station of your choice. You have good amount of control over it. But what you may not have is the piston, the clutch plate. What is it made of? Like, is it to that level? If you went, you will not have much control. So because the hardware is totally abstract, or the mechanical stuffs or the electrical stuffs, those things you don't have control there. So that is a simple example. If you were to give infrastructure as a service, the equivalent of GCP is called as compute engine, and in layman terms, it's your own car. You have good amount of control. Now, if we go up the ladder, you get something called as container as a service, CAS. So in this container as a service, what we do basically is our focus is not on virtual machines. Our focus is more towards how do we deploy containers. So for folks who don't know what is container, we are going to do a deep dive session on containers. So treat containers as a way of packaging your application. It could be a database, it could be a application code, anything. It is packaged in such a form that it can get deployed anywhere. So that is a simple way of representing containers. So treat it like something like a small cake. If you take it as a cake, uh, if you directly put it in a box, a normal box, and you transport this cake from one place to another place, and if it's a cake which can melt, it may go off. By the time it reaches the other place, it may melt off. So, but if you have a casing or a container, a plastic container or some kind of a container which can preserve the temperature, all those things. So the container, you move from one place which is very cold to a place where which is very hot. It does not matter. The container is built in such a way that the cake is going to be preserved the same way. It is the same thing. If you have a code, uh, if you have containerized it, you move from AWS to GCP, GCP to Azure, or Azure to on-prem, or on-prem to your local laptop. It's going to work everywhere. That's basically container in a nutshell. There, the focus is more on managing containers, all those things. So the focus is not on which operating system I should use. So that's your container as a service model. So in GCP, the equivalent which you get is Kubernetes, GKE, Google Kubernetes Engine. So a simple layman example, if I were to give it, it is not your own car. It is something like a carpooling. You can treat it as. So in carpooling, you get a seat allocated. You can sit in the car in that carpooling. And you can commute your office. So you don't have more control there because it is somebody's car, maybe your friend's car, your colleague's car. So little control only you have. That is your carpooling. You get a seat allocated. That's it. So if you go up the ladder, you get the next kind of compute model, which is platform as a service, PaaS. So here we abstract the infrastructure completely, and what you get to know is only the application layer. What kind of applications you are going to run, whether you are going to run a database, whether you are going to run a Python web application, or a .NET web application, or a Java application. So that is what they are going to provide you. Basically, they'll give you a runtime. They, in the sense, the cloud provider is going to give you a runtime. You want .NET runtime, you want Java runtime, Python runtime, so that you can deploy applications which can get deployed basically. So that's your platform as a service, or you want to only focus on database, nothing else. So that's your platform as a service model. The equivalent of that in GCP is called as App Engine. And just for your information, this was the first product which Google launched in 2008. So um, it is like when the entire world was focusing on virtualization in 2007, 2008, Google was thinking of platform as a service there itself. So very advanced, and that could be they were so advanced that could be one of the reasons why they were not able to capture the market in that time. They realized that mistake, and now they are focusing on multi-cloud, all those things. So if you are a fan of Kamala Hassan, or you have heard of Kamala Hassan, it is a similar stuff. Like I'm not sure how many of you have watched the various movies of this actor. He does films which is well advanced, where sometimes people don't understand at that time period. Like Hey Ram, when I was in college or when I was in school, I heard this language. To understand this movie, you need to have 5 languages. Now we see that that movie is too good. The artwork, all those things is too good, so people did not realize that. Now with so many YouTube reviews, all those things, people go now watch it. So it is something similar. So App Engine, they did something which was well in advance. People did not realize that. How can we just give a code, it gets deployed, managed by cloud provider? We just need a virtual machine, is what people were thinking at that time. AWS and Azure was focusing on what they wanted. They just gave what they wanted. They somehow excelled in that market at that time, and Google also accepted that without little advance. So just a small side note on that. So a simple layman example for platform as a service is like your Ubers and your Olas, your taxi, basically, where you have very, very limited control there. It is somebody's car managed by a management or something. You just get picked up and dropped from a point to point. That's it. If the car breaks down in the middle, you don't need to worry. You can just get out of it, pay the cost for the duration, and come out of it. There's somebody is going to manage it for you. Sometimes you may get little control, like whether you want a hatchback or whether you want a sedan, but some taxi providers does not even provide you that. So you have very, very limited control here. uh, that's your platform as a service. If you go up the ladder slightly, you get something called as function as a service. Usually they call this as serverless options. This serverless is basically a marketing term. So what it basically means is, to you as a customer, you don't need to worry about servers. The cloud provider is going to manage it for you. Your focus should be more towards a code, deploying a code, scaling it. That's it. So that is your function as a service, where the application layer is also abstracted. The application layer is also abstracted, but your focus is only on writing a small piece of code, and which gets triggered uh, during an event. For example, just an example, please don't take me wrong. So it was a car example only, like 2 examples I can give. One, assume it's your any kind of car, your car, your friend's car, your taxi, anything. um, if there's a fuel empty, fuel is getting emptied, you will get an indication. So this is when the fuel gets empty, you get a indicator on your dashboard. So this is one option. Only when an event occurs, you get something triggered. Or something like, again, just don't take me wrong here. So an accident occurs, assume. So the airbag pops up. Only when an accident occurs, the airbag comes. So there's an event and there's an action on that. So only when that time comes. So if this kind of a trigger happens, this comes. So this is your simple layman example, if you were to give for function as a service. So in GCP, it is called as cloud functions. In AWS, this is popularly called as Lambda, AWS Lambda. In Azure, it is called as Azure functions. So these are, and the last one is your SaaS offering, which is your software as a service, your salesforce.com, your Workday, uh, Office 365, Google Workspace, all those things. You don't know really where the data gets stored, where it gets processed, all those things. So just use and pay for it. Usually it's going to be based on number of users, some kind of licensing model. A simple layman example could be something like your public transport, uh, a metro, bus, something like that, where you have very, very, very limited control. You just need to, if your house is not near to a metro station or a bus stop, you have to walk, get into it, and it's not going to drop till your office. It's going to just drop it at a specific station, and you have limited control only at the seat where you sit, where you there only you can change your aircon. The seat, you may not control what kind of cushion you want, so you have very, very limited control. It's going to be cheaper. So these are the various compute options which you get: infrastructure as a service, container as a service, platform as a service, and function as a service. And you have equivalent of these things in GCP. One important thing which you need to remember is, as you go up the ladder from the bottom to the top, the level of abstraction increases, meaning the control, how much you can control this compute options, going to reduce. You'll have limited control in cloud functions. Sorry, you will have sorry, you will have limited function control over in cloud functions. They are going to give you, these are the code you can run. If you say I want to run something like a code which I want to, which is in Perl, in C, you cannot run. They will say no, it is not possible. So but if you say I want to run a C code, definitely you can run it in compute engine. Definitely it is possible to run it in Kubernetes engine. In app engine, cloud functions, limited control. Now if you say I want Windows with GPUs specifically, you have options in um, Kubernetes and GKE. So if you say I want a custom virtual machine which is there in my on-premise, I want to bring the same thing to GCP, then the only option which you have is going to be compute engine. So if you want more control, you can use the bottom options. If you want less control, zero operations, your focus is more towards writing code, all those things, up the ladder like cloud functions, app engine is going to come very handy. And there's a in between product, I would say, between app engine and Kubernetes engine. I don't know what to name it as. It is called as Cloud Run. When doing the demonstration, I'll try to introduce you after app engine. We'll see some drawbacks of app engine. To fulfill that drawback, Google has released a new product. It's almost like 1.5 years old product called as Cloud Run, which has a very good future. Uh, till last 2 week, uh, the previous batch student who cleared it told me that there's no question on Cloud Run. So even I have not got any questions on Cloud Run. So only from the implementation perspective, we'll look into that Cloud Run part. Okay. So with that background, we'll start with our, so what we will do is we'll start in the fashion in which the ladder is there. So we'll start with compute engine. That's going to be our building block, virtual machines. We already know how to create a virtual machine, but we have not gone into details of it. So we will look into the details of virtual machine in detail. I would say this itself is going to take a good amount of time. Then we'll go to Kubernetes engine, app engine. After app engine, we will have a slight deviation called as Cloud Run. Once we understand Cloud Run, we'll come back to cloud functions. Okay, that's going to be our journey for compute options, the module 3. So let's start with GCE, Google Compute Engine, and wherever it is possible, I'm going to use that acronym. The reason is, in the exam, they'll simply mention that. So you should be aware of, and even when you're talking to the customers, they may use acronyms. So you should be aware of. I'm not a great fan of acronyms. I try to avoid using acronyms, but some we cannot expect the same thing from others. So they use acronyms, so we should be aware of. And on the first day, I had mentioned GCP in 4 words. That is the same thing which I'm going to use to introduce any of those services. Compute engine, if I were to explain it in 4 words, it's VMs, GPUs, TPUs, something very special offered from Google, Tensor Processing Unit, and your disk. A virtual machine should definitely have a disk. So also remember, I had mentioned 1% or 2% of AWS and Azure concepts you are going to learn in the class. That is basically comparing what is the equivalent of that in AWS and Azure. GCE, the equivalent of that in TPUs are tensor processing unit. So this is Google's proprietary processing unit. So most of the cloud provider can provide you GPU, central processing unit, graphical processing unit. That's it. But Google provides you something called as tensor processing unit, which is their own proprietary processing unit for running something very heavy machine learning models and all. They use that. So the equivalent of GCE in AWS is called as Elastic Compute Model. AWS EC2 is what usually call it in short. In Azure, it is called as Azure Virtual Machine. Now, a small observation, folks. In GCP, all the icons are going to be hexagon, and please don't ask me what is the reason for it is to be hexagon. This is the strategy, or this is what they are following. Every service will be hexagon, and inside the hexagon, you will have something. So if you see virtual machine, it is like a processor kind of an icon, and slowly you will get used to this icons. Um, and there's going to be a stage at which you will be able to easily realize that, okay, this is the icon, this is virtual machine. It's just getting used to it. That's it. The reason why these icons are going to be helpful is you as a cloud architect are going to basically build building blocks where you have to mention these components. So knowing these components is going to be good. And towards the end, I'll also show you how you can create architectures. There are good amount of tools available, free tools itself available. And if you are using something like Visio kind of stuff in a corporate, you can also use that also. So icons are going to be really helpful there. That's the first observation with respect to the icons. With respect to the names for each services, right? I would say the names of Azure are really good. So if you're totally new, right? If somebody says compute engine, you'll not understand itself. And if you see AWS names are the, I would say, no need to comment on their names there. So what they wanted to convey, what is there, nowhere syncs. Elastic Compute Cloud. Only if you are something like uh, having some good understanding, you can easily make a this thing. Oh, this is virtual machines. But look at Azure names. Simple, straightforward. Azure virtual machines. Anybody with minimum IT exposure can easily do it. So the naming wise, Azure names are really good. Even though we are learning GCP, just wanted to give a credit there. The namings of the various services in Azure is really good. Just a side note there. Now, when you talk of virtual machines, folks, what and all comes to your mind? So if you have not really worked on virtual machines, for a minute, take about a laptop for folks who don't come from that background. So if you're looking at a virtual machine or a laptop, what and all stuff comes to your mind? If you are purchasing, if you're planning to purchase something, what does it come to your mind? What and all features do you expect, basically? First of all, if it's a virtual machine or a laptop you're planning to purchase, what is something which comes to your mind? Memory, processor, good. Then what kind of processor? Disk space, beautiful. CPU, memory, disk space, awesome. Those are the main things which comes to our mind. So that is the same thing which we are going to learn also. So in GCP, you call these things as predefined machine types. So there's going to be a machine type where it's going to give you vCPU and memory. Because it's all virtualized in cloud, you'll never get a physical core. A CPU, you will never get it. What you get is a virtual CPU. And there's a small math which you can do. One core, maybe I'll just put this in the uh, examination tip. I don't have a documentation proving this, folks. I have heard this, but I have searched for many times. But I have heard in few um, Google meetings, all those things, where this is how the map does. One core or one core is equal to 2 vCPU in GCP. It could be the same thing in other cloud also, but this is the math which they do. So meaning this could be helpful during migration. So if it's on premise and it is still a bare metal, one core. If you have to double this in GCP. So this is going to be helpful even for your real-time implementation when you are doing some migration. Just keep this in mind. One core or one CPU is equal to 2 vCPU in GCP. So you have different machine types available in GCP, general machine types, memory optimized, compute optimized, and shared stuff. So if it's a general machine type, basically for your day-to-day work, you want to do something low cost stuff, you can use a series called as E2 series. Then you have some standard machine types, which is N. Why N? I really don't know. So N, usually the number next to that, it indicates the generation. E2 is a second generation. N1 is a first generation. N2 is a second generation. N2D is your AMD. The D ending with, it's going to show AMD. So yes, you can also get AMD processors in GCP. I'm a great fan of AMD processor. I still have a laptop or a desktop which I purchased in my engineering. So sometimes it really works, sometimes it does not work very well. That's what I've heard. But AMD processors are also supported in GCP. Uh, the standard one is a balanced one. So where you want to run a typical database, a website kind of a stuff, uh, N series, whether it is Intel or AMD, those works very well. But assume you have a memory intensive application like SAP HANA or any memory intensive database. Like Raiders kind of stuffs, and you really need that processing capacity there where your memory to CPU ratio is very high. So at that point, you will use something called as memory optimized machine types M1, or sorry, M1, M2 series is what you're going to use. Um, Memory intensive, SAP HANA, something like if you work in healthcare industry, life science kind of stuff where DNA sequencing, RNA sequencing, if you are going to do, you definitely need good amount of memory there. So at that point, this kind of series machine types are going to be helpful. M for memory optimized. So the last one is compute optimized. So if you work for some kind of a broadcast agency or work for a computer graphics organization where you're going to do some 3D rendering, all those kind of stuffs, you need some better CPUs, vCPUs. So that's where you will use compute optimized OS. Any kind of gaming will definitely require 3D rendering, all those things. So it's going to be really helpful. There's one question in memory sort operation. Yeah, that's also possible. So if it's a normal database, that's fine. If it's SAP HANA, it's basically called as in-memory database. So you need to have a good amount of memory there. So that's where memory optimized comes into picture. Uh, if it's more of CPU intensive stuff, you go for compute optimized machine types. And the last one is what we are going to use very heavily, shared core. Basically, this is not for any uh, workload hosting, but for learning purpose only. So if you want to learn something, you would have already seen we always use F1 micro because it is the smallest machine type which you can get in GCP. The only reason why we use it, that is so that we don't incur huge costs. We can keep that $300 till 90 days, basically for that purpose. So as I mentioned, you get it in different processors. Intel N1 is usually Intel Sandy, Skylake, Broadwell, all those things. Intel N2 series are basically Cascade. Intel Cascade as the processor, and you also get AMD processors also. Now, sometimes these series are going to be really helpful when the customer says, "I want a specific clock speed." So the processor clock, something like anything about 2.8 gigahertz is what I need to have. Below this, I'm not okay to have it, is what will happen. So at that time, specifically looking into the documentation, which type of which machine types is going to support that. Usually N2 series supports more than 2.8 gigahertz clock speed. So the clock speed sometimes is going to be really important while migration. So nothing from the exam perspective, but if you just go to the documentation and look into it, you'll come to know what is the clock speed they provide. So you have to make a judgment which is going to be better. For the clock speed, the machine type and the clock speed sometimes is going to be important there. So that's your predefined one. So no big deal. Every cloud provider provides the same thing uh, when it comes to here. So only in AWS and Azure, the naming is going to be different. That's it. In AWS, it's going to be called as T series, A series kind of stuff. Uh, a small examination tip in the exam, right? There may be some questions where they will just name the machine type N1 standard 6, or sorry, N1 standard 4, something like that. They're just going to mention the machine type, and they're not going to ask what is this vCPU and memory it is composed of. But the question would be just on towards whether the system is powerful enough or not, something on the performance. There may be a question. So in that time, definitely you will not have any material to refer during the exam. So a small tip will help you out. What is that tip is usually the format of this machine types are usually some alphabet X, like it could be N, it could be E, it could be M, or it could be C. Then there's going to be a number followed by some memory information, followed by the last one is a vCPU count. So forget about all these things. Basically, N1 standard, forget all those things. Just remember the last number. If it's ending with, it's always going to end with a number. And that number is nothing but your vCPU count. So a small tip. Now, if you see something like N1 high CPU 2, it's an indication that it is 2 vCPU. That number is nothing but your vCPU count. So it's going to give you that hint, okay, the database or the system which has been provisioned is slightly a decent machine. So if it is something like 1, 2, some kind of stuff, and they are saying some performance issues, maybe there could be a possible choice. Increase the machine type could be a possible answer. So the small trick will help you out. If I just go to my compute engine screen, just to show you that. So if I just create it, you can see any series, you should be able to see the same thing. So if I just zoom this a little, so the series which we saw, E2, N2, N2D, N1 series, this is what you see. Now let me take N2 series just for example. So these are the series which you, the machine types which you see. Anywhere you see N2 standard 16. 16 indicates 16 vCPU. So it's a small tip, folks. It can come very handy. N2 high memory 80. So 80 vCPU is what you can get. So small tip. This was helpful for me actually, even in the recertification. So something on this came where it was more towards the performance of the system. I don't remember the actual number, but something they've mentioned in the this thing. So the database is provisioned with something like N2 standard 8, N2 standard 4 or 8, something like that. And they were asking something related to the performance stuff. So how do you increase the performance? So at that time, this is going to give you an indication whether it's really powerful or not. A small examination tip. So going back to predefined stuff, as I mentioned, this is not a big deal. Every cloud provider provides it. But something for a minute, if I have a requirement like this, and I'm going to assume few things, and it's going to be a small activity which I want you to do for the next 5 minutes. So my requirement is, and this is my requirement. You cannot question my requirement. I'm the creator of this application, a web application or whatever it is. You can treat it as. So I need 6 vCPU and 17.75 GB of RAM. Okay, this is the requirement. I have already considered OS overhead, including the OS stuff, all those things. This is what I need. If you, now I am the customer, you people are the cloud architects. If you can design me this kind of an infra, my app is going to work 100% optimized. Okay, now you can, I'm not bind by anything, so you can go with any of the cloud provider, the top 3. Go and let me know what could be the best machine type I can use. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, first for now, just let's explore in Azure and AWS. I'm just going to give you a link. You can just use this, spend around 5 minutes for both the stuffs, and let me know what's going to be the possible option. And this is the official documentation. So this is for your AWS, and the next one is for your Azure. Let me know, folks, whether this can be achieved. So this is an activity. I want you to do it, and it's going to be, I'm going to give you 5 minutes. It's just a documentation. And what is the requirement you need to fulfill is this one, folks. Let me know what machine type in AWS you can achieve this. In Azure, what you can achieve it. Go for it, folks. Your time starts now. And please put it in the private chat. Just looking into the documentation, nothing else. I know there are a good amount of Azure and AWS folks. We can get some better answers. Uh, if I can get a series name like N2 series, like how we get it, something like that. You can take general purpose, memory optimized, whatever. Okay, you can. I just need this. That's it. Whatever it is, whether it's memory optimized, compute optimized, general purpose, does not matter. I just need this basically. Uh, this is what I need, Anil Kali. So try to get it. Just just more of an exploration. That's it. 1 hour 30 minutes over, folks. You have around 3.5 minutes more. Okay, I'm getting few response. So I'll keep it. Then I'll add it in the notepad. Kumar, when you mentioned that, if you can mention what is that CPU and memory for that, this thing which you have got, it would be helpful. Instead of we looking into like, so for example, uh, Mohammed gave one option where he mentioned how much CPU, how much memory that series comes with. You have mentioned something. If you can mention what is that vCPU and memory count for that series would be helpful. Two and a half minutes over, folks. Okay, got something from Mangesh, Mohammed, Anil. I like the answer from Anil B. So I'm going to disclose the answer later. Uh, for Now, slowly let me copy it, folks. So it's 3 minutes, so I can start disclosing some of the answers. This is what I got it from Muhammad Mansur Ali. Then this is from Kumar. If I can know what is that series, it is going to be helpful. From Mangesh, I assume this is from AWS, if it's not wrong. Then Anil B's, I'm not going to disclose the answer now. Towards the later, I'm going to disclose it. Deepak Bhandari, this is for AWS, is what I get. AWS, okay, I got from Aman. This is the series. Most of you have got that series, is what I get it. Uh, compute optimized in Azure, okay. If you could have mentioned what is that, it's going to be better. The series for this thing, it's going to be all right. Okay, sorry, what was that? Uh, yes, so that was the whole purpose, folks, just to find any series. Oh, this is AWS. Okay, any series, I guess I have not missed anything. All right, folks, time up. Now, what was the conclusion which you figure it out? So the conclusion, as most of you got it, it was an activity for yourself. You will see this kind of stuffs in migration stuffs. The first thing is they want exactly as is. Now, uh, most of the options, let's go with the number one cloud provider, AWS. So where I got some options, 8 cores, 32 GB of RAM, 8 vCPU. Okay, it is, if I'm not wrong, it's going to be 8 vCPU, not CPU if I'm not wrong. 8 and 16, 8 and 16, 8, 16. 8, 16 was the most prominent one which most of you gave. Uh, 8 uh, 8 vCPU, 32 if I'm not wrong. 32 is also possible. 8 vCPU, 32 GB RAM, or you have another series which I have never seen it with 16 also. Similar thing is what you also would have found out in Azure. Since you spent a time, I don't need to go there. Maybe, okay, let me quickly go through it. Maybe that's going to be better. If I go to my, and this is all available in the bookmarks, folks, the common folder if you go. Okay, so most of you mentioned what was that series, folks? uh, uh, nah, this one is what you would have mentioned. So it was a very good easy option, this one. Or there was there an option where 8 and 32 was available? Mansoor Mohammed, you got it? What was that actually? Is there a 32 available? Let me just see what was that option which Mansoor gave. M2. Okay, in M2 series. Okay, M2. Okay, let me M4, right? M4. You get this one also. Closer. Now that's what you get. In Azure, if I just go to general purpose, just taking randomly, that's it. And this is again an official documentation. So if I just go to general purpose, uh, anything which is going to be just clicking on a random link, that's it. I get this one, standard, does not need to be memory optimized. So standard 832 is what I get. Similarly, I may have 816 also. But the conclusion, as most of you mentioned, I cannot get a mapping which you are expecting. It is supposed to be uh, I gave already 6 vCPU, Shripal. So I was very specific because I know this is going to be in cloud. I did not give 6 CPU. So it was 6 vCPU only. I gave it directly as vCPU only. So it is not bare metal. So if it was 6 CPU, your point is totally valid. But I was very specific. My workload is going to be on cloud. So I gave in vCPU only. Now the key part is it is not possible in your other two cloud providers, right? Now, if I go with this option, what's going to happen, folks? What's going to happen if I go with this option? 8 vCPU, 32 GB of RAM. What's going to happen, basically? Overkill, more memory, uh, okay, more memory, over memory, okay, more cost. That is the most important thing, cost from Mohammed. So the cost, it's more cost. um, so memory can be underutilized, absolutely correct. CPU is also underutilized, memory is also underutilized, plus your cost is going to shoot up. And as a application development team, I have told I just need this. If you give me anything more, I'm not going to use it because my app can only use this with all the OS overhead, all those things. If you just give me this, I'm happy. So that is the option. So here it's going to be an overkill, basically. If I go here with this option, what's going to be the problem here, folks? 8 vCPU, 16 GB of RAM. What's going to happen? This is going to be more expensive, slow processing. So because you performance issue will be having, so you will have performance issue. So you are stuck. Either you are going to give a expensive solution, expensive, or performance issues are going to come if you slightly downgrade it, because I can easily blame you as a cloud architect. I told to give 17.75, you have given me 16, so I'm falling short of a good amount of memory and you cannot expect 100% optimized solution. I simply put a blame and go, that's it. So this is what happens with your Azure also. Now this is where Google really rocks. So you can easily take this as a very unique feature. Uh, what you have in GCP is called as custom machine type. You can choose a machine type of your choice. And by doing this, what you're going to get is a cost optimized solution. Very much similar to what you want is what you get, basically, most of the time. I just put that most of the time. The reason is there are certain rules which you need to follow. The vCPU cannot be a odd number. It can be only one, or it could be any even number, 266 2468, anything. And the memory has to be between 0.28 to 6.5 per vCPU. It's going to be little hectic. This formula is little hectic. The simple formula I can say you is vCPU should be either one or an even number. Simple to remember. Nothing from the exam perspective, folks. This is only when you're doing some design. So you want to recollect this. And the memory should be 250 MB increments, 0.25 GB increment. So that was the reason very easily I was able to give a number like this. 6, it's an even number, and 17.5 I can have, 17.25 I can have, but I cannot have 17.30. This kind of stuff is should not possible. It should be 0.25 increment, 0.25 GB increment. So actually the whole question was or the entire process was drafted. I have a solution in GCP. I wanted you to try whether it is possible in Azure and AWS. That was the whole way. It was more to give it impression that GCP was really good here. So this is your one of the unique features. Could be a possible interview question. So if the interviewer asks you, tell me one or two unique features which you don't get, very unique feature which you don't get it in other cloud, but it's only in GCP, then you can easily say custom machine type. You don't get it anywhere, And we have some AWS experts, we have some Azure experts. What I hear is it is not possible. You can give a try if you want to check, but this kind of a machine configuration, you don't get it. If you have, so that's it. So I mentioned it. Most of the time, you're going to get it. If you have a 5 vCPU, definitely it is not possible. So you have to go with 6 vCPUs there. So here, instead of totally no, we have some solution which you can provide in GCP. So at least in this context, GCP shines better than other two cloud providers. So totally agree with Kumar. If it's 5 vCPU, 3 vCPU, odd numbers except one, even that is not possible in GCP. And the reason why GCP is able to do this kind of stuffs, the custom machine type, is simple reason. Google manufactures their own infra. The only thing which they get it is they get the processor from Intel and AMD. The entire infrastructure they provision. They are one of the largest infra manufacturers, and they manufacture it only for themselves. But if you look into other cloud provider, they get it from HP, EMC kind of stuffs, AWS and Azure. So that's another difference, folks. Uh, these are some unique features which Google brings in. So now let me just show you whether I can really do this or not. Was it just a marketing thing, or can I really do it? 6 vCPU, 17.75 GB of RAM. Is it really possible? Let me just show you, and it's not going to take me a longer time to do this. So if I just go, so let me just zoom this. So I'll just call this as custom machine type. Now, if I go to, let me take the first generation. Any generation is okay. So these are your standard machine types which you get. But beyond, the first one is going to be always custom machine type. Custom machine type. If I select it, it's going to give me an option to input my details. It's not a fixed one, it's a user input. So I can give something like, if I give 6, it's going to recommend for a 6 vCPU machine, you should have at least 22.5 GB of RAM. But my recommendation or my requirement is only 17.75, nothing else. So I can just definitely get this. That's it. Let's go ahead and click create. And let's see whether we can provision, whether it really gets provisioned or not. So here there is one column which is going to be important, which is mostly hidden. Click on this columns called as machine type. Turn this on. It's going to show what is the machine configuration from the UI itself. If you want to see the real value, you can SSH also. We'll do that also. So if I just uncheck these two columns, so 6 vCPU, 17.75. I would easily say it's going to be very difficult to see such kind of a configuration in real world. Google can do it. That's a good one. So let me SSH and really show you whether it is 6 vCPU, 17.75 GB RAM. And I usually do this kind of classes to multiple groups. In one of the groups, right, uh, one of the person had a question. Maybe the 6 vCPU 17.75 GB of RAM was maybe higher, then the cost may be a little higher. Rather than that, if you go with AWS 8 vCPU 32 GB of RAM, it's going to be cheaper is what he told. So what we did at that time was we went into a pricing calculator. So it was a one-to-one comparison. Went to AWS pricing calculator and enter the similar configuration in a specific region. The same thing was done in GCP also, and it came out that GCP's 6 vCPU 17.75 GB of RAM was $30 lesser than 8 vCPU, 32 GB of RAM, $30 per month. So with the minimum setup which we did. So price wise also, if you see, if you do a one-on-one comparison, GCP is going to still come out as a winner. So I did not check with Azure because I did not know how to play around with the Azure pricing calculator. So just for your information, price wise also is going to be really true. At the end, the price is the one which matters. It came around like $30 more in AWS. So if I put ls CPU, so this is the command which is going to help you to find out the CPU here. So I can just see 6 vCPUs. Good. Now if I do something like free minus m, it's going to show me that 17.75 GB of RAM. So this is in megabytes. Or you want to use something like cat proc meminfo, you'll come to know the memory available. So it's a complete customized stuff which you get, at least as of today, only available in GCP. So a very, very unique feature. You can easily say this in the beginning, right? If it's for a GCP interview is what you're going to try, this could be really helpful. So if they want to just get to know what are your, like, how comfortable you are with GCP, they may ask you, tell me at least one or two stuffs which is very unique in GCP. This is one thing. The another which is other thing which is very unique in GCP is um, eco-friendly. So all the GCP ecosystem is carbon free. So everything works on renewable energy, which is solar, wind turbines, all those things. So that's the biggest this thing, and this is one of the reason why GCP, most of the services in GCP is going to be, if you do a one-on-one comparison with other cloud, it's going to be cheaper. So because they don't need to pay anything extra right here for electricity, it is coming from wind turbines, solar system, solar energy, their price they make it less. So for example, if you take a simple example, if you have a garden where you can grow some vegetables and you are making a recipe out of it and you want to sell it, so the cost of that is going to be little less versus a person who buys vegetables from outside market, from a market, and creates a similar recipe. So a person who does not have a market or does not have a garden buys it, prepares a recipe and sells it, it's like more like your AWS and Azure. They're going to put that margin to the customer so that they can derive the benefits out of it, because they are spending some stuffs there like electricity, all those things. When it comes to GCP, it's totally renewable energies. So your price is going to be little lesser, believe it or not, uh, only based on this feature, right? Carbon neutral. In one of the previous organization, I was able to close an opportunity very easily. So was never knowing that whether we are going to get such a response for this carbon neutral feature of Google, because that company also was behind the same thing. The founder had the same thing. We should be carbon neutral, most of them. So when we showed this, believe it or not, 10 minutes they were talking on this itself. So it was we had to talk, but they started talking, and it was the first meeting. So this itself gave us a push to do a proof of concept. So sometimes all of a sudden some other feature which you may never think could be really a driving point could become a driving point, at least. So carbon neutral stuff or carbon free was an important thing there. So this is a very unique feature. Any questions on this, folks? Uh, Limitations are still there, like Kumar asked. If it's an odd number vCPU, not possible in GCP also. For example, if I just show you that, it's going to throw me that this thing. So if I just Anil Kumar did not understand what is the three features. Okay, you wanted to say three features which is very unique in GCP is what you're asking. Is your question? Any three features which is unique in GCP? Global network is the first feature I will say always, which is unique in GCP. AWS is coming very close, but still not there. Second, if it's specifically carbon neutral or carbon free. The third one, if they are saying about virtual machine, I can talk about custom machine types. Which you mean use GCP using the solar energy or electricity, that is called as carbon neutral or eco-friendly. So usually, okay, your they are going to use solar energy, right? So solar energy definitely becomes eco-friendly. So when you are eco-friendly, basically the amount of carbon dioxide which you are releasing to the atmosphere is going to definitely reduce. Basically, that's what it's a combination, Vijay. It's a combination basically. So if you are a person with more of eco like environment stuff, you can definitely look into the documentation. Carbon, okay. If these two words are slightly misguiding, I would say it's not is what I understand. So you are not using electricity. So to generate electricity, you have to burn certain stuffs where you are going to release carbon dioxide. So here you're not going to release it. That's the key part. So if I show the machine type custom, if I use something like an odd number, it's going to say either it should be 4 or 6. So if I mention something like this, it's going to show 0.25 increments. So that's how it works basically. Anil Kumar, hope your question is answered. The three features uh, of GCP. At least so far, what we have explored is global network. AI, you can talk if you want. Then your carbon neutral stuff using renewable energies and your custom machine type. At least so far, what we have explored. All right, folks. So that's our machine types option, very unique. The next part is basically what? Once you have the vCPU and memory stuff, what next? Storage. Where will you keep all your OS stuff, your data? You need to have a disk, right? So you get two types of disks basically in GCP. One is a network attached storage, which is attached to a network. So it does not attach to a local system. Like if you have a laptop, you will have a disk running locally in your laptop. If that disk or if your system does not boot up, you cannot access that disk itself, basically, right? So that is machine attached. That's machine attached usually. Here Google tries to use something called as network attached. So it's not part of your virtual machine. So it is attached via a network. So whenever the system boots up, this disk is going to be attached. So two types of stuff: network attached storage, machine attached storage. So when it comes to network attached storage, there are three types of disk which Google provides. Standard persistent disk, PD stands for persistent disk. And again, this acronym is going to be real important. Let me just go here because I have seen they just use this acronym all of a sudden. PD is equal to your persistent disk, folks. Persistent disk. So you have a standard persistent disk, which is nothing but your traditional magnetic disk. You have SSD, which is solid state drive. So most of the laptops these days come with a local SSD. So which is going to be a little faster. The input output operation is going to be much faster with SSD persistent disk. And recently in Google Next 2020, they announced something called as balanced persistent disk. Which is going to be in between your standard, which is magnetic, and your SSD. So in between, if you want to have a input output operation little better, but you also want to have a little cheaper cost, then you go with something called as balanced persistent disk. So these are all your uh, network attached. The next one which you have is locally attached or machine attached storage. This is your local SSD. So why do you need to have a local SSD? There could be a requirement where you want to get the most uh, whenever it is network attached, there's going to be a latency there. So if you don't want that latency and you want to have a very high input output operations, IOPS, basically the disk is usually judged by its IOPS capability. How many times I can do an input output operations there. So if you want a very high, something in like 16K or 20K input output operations per second, local SSD is going to be a good choice. Those are two options which you get, and whenever it comes to a disk, right, you get some good capabilities from GCP where the disks are highly durable, except the local SSD. So these features which I'm talking are primarily for your network attached. They're highly durable, so durability is the most important thing. So if a disk fails, can I still retrieve the data? That's where the durability comes into picture. uh, these are independent volumes and they can be resized live. That's the most important thing. We are going to see a demo of that maybe in the second half of today's class, where we are going to resize the disk size live without any downtime. I'm not coming from a storage background, so I'm not sure whether this is possible in other like on-premise in other cloud, but in GCP you can do this live resizing. The disk can be resized even when the virtual machine is running with just a couple of Linux commands. That's it. So a very good features is what you get with persistent disk. Always prefer to use network attached. The reason is if something goes wrong with the virtual machine, no problem. Dismantle that virtual machine, but use your disk, attach it to a new virtual machine. That should be the approach here, folks. So whenever you are working with cloud, any cloud per se, if something goes wrong, don't go and simply try to fix it. Dismantle it. You will definitely use most of the time network attached storage. Attach it to a new system. That's it. That should be the approach instead of going and fixing what happened. So in on-prem, you don't have that luxury, but here you have that luxury of reprovisioning a new virtual machine. Go for it. Be more smarter. Spend more time on these kinds of debugging stuffs, but spend more time on deriving business insights, fulfilling the business requirements, basically through the infrastructure. At the end of the session, it's not very clear about SAN versus okay. Network attached storage. SAN is, I know, understand, but how can I map to SAN storage? We'll definitely talk about the SAN storage. Storage area network, we'll talk about it. Storage area network also maps to persistent disk only here in GCP. So this one, you don't take it as a true network attached storage, uh, Anil B. So the thing is that it's going to be basically a disk where it's not attached to the VMs. Basically, that's the key part here. So that's where I use this word network attached. So it's not a true NAS storage. So if it's a true NAS storage, it's going to be, it can be easily mounted. All those things is what you're going to see. So you can be mounted to multiple virtual machines, all those things. So here, per virtual machine you can easily attach it. One virtual machine can be attached at any given point of time. If you want multiple virtual machines to attach to a disk, then you have a product in GCP called as file store. We'll talk about that at a later point of time. So this one is per VM. So per VM, local SSD, it will be attached where another server is located. Yes, where in which zone you are provisioning it. So it's going to be part of that zone only, basically. And if it's network attached, it could be regional, basically dual regional. So if the server, if it's local SSD, right, if the virtual machine uh, crashes or something, the data in your local SSD will be destroyed. It will go off because it's attached to the disk. But if it's a network attached, even if the system does not boot up, I can attach it to another system. It's going to work. So that's the stuff. Now we'll take a 10 minutes break, folks. We'll take a break and come back. Once we come back, we will look into two types of VMs which we have, and yeah, two types of VMs. We have few slides. Once we finish the slide, we will do some demonstration on our virtual machine. Okay, so where we will go through each and every field in that virtual machine stuff and get an understanding. So take a 10 minutes break and come back. So if I stop the recording,
This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Before the break, we saw some good important features: the machine type and the disk details. Now let's look into one more important information about or feature about the virtual machines which we have in GCP. You usually get two classes of VMs. One is a regular VM, standard. So what you mention, what is the machine type in which specific zone you are going to get it. That's it. And it's going to be at a regular price. No rocket science, simple, straightforward. The second kind of machine types which you get, so second types of VMs which you get is called as preemptive VMs. PVM is a short form. In the exam also they will mention it like this only. So PVM. So this is a slightly special kind of VMs. This is basically provided at 80%, up to 80% discount. So if your regular price is $5, 80% of that, you can make a math. It's going to be, that is going to be the cost basically. Now, uh, these kind of VMs are usually used for some ad hoc workloads where it's not business critical, but you want to do a processing. For example, maybe Friday you ran some promotion and you need to do generate some analytics on top of it, and it's an ad hoc promotion which you did. So the team says, okay, we need to do some processing. Can you just get us the processed data? So you quickly provision a virtual machine and use preemptive VM because it's going to give you up to 80% cost benefit, and you run it. So you do the processing and give the output to them. So what's the drawback of this preemptive VM is it is a short-lived virtual machine, meaning Google can take back your virtual machine basically by just giving a 30 seconds notice. That's it. So they're going to send a soft signal, please shut down the system. If you don't do it, they are going to forcefully take it off after 30 seconds. So, and fortunately, if Google does not take it, then maximum the life of this virtual machine is going to be 24 hours. This is the maximum life of a preemptive virtual machine. So even if nothing happens, Google does not preempt it, after 24 hours it's going to be preempted automatically. So they cannot give you more than 24 hours with this discounted price. So this is basically your preemptible virtual machine. Now if you want to know what's really going on behind the scene, why this 80%, all those details, it is very simple. Now let's assume there's a data center, say for example XYZ data center. In one of those 24 regions, you have 73 data centers. In one data center, uh, the utilization is very less. Now, it's like the same retail market kind of a stuff. If the utilization is not less, they will provide you something at a discounted price. Now, you log in. Maybe I log in into the system and I wanted to say, let me provision a virtual machine. I want a virtual machine of this specification. Uh, and I want it at a discounted price. You just turn on a small drop down. That's it. Select a drop down. It's going to turn this virtual machine into a preemptible virtual machine, and you provision. You start using it. For example, let me take. I wanted two vCPU, two vCPU, and um, 4 GB RAM. This is what you are using. Currently, you are using it as a PVM. Preemptive virtual machine, preemptible virtual machine. uh, when you started, the utilization of that data center was less. Assume it is like Monday early morning, so you started it, it is running. Now after that, people start provisioning more resources in that data center, it's going on well. Now at one point of time, right, the data center would have reached its capacity, 100% utilization, or coming very close, 100% utilization. And assume you are the only customer who's using PVM, all other customers are using regular VMs. Now there is a customer, a new customer, maybe at 4 p.m. in the evening, he comes and provisions a virtual machine, and fortunately it is something like this one. It could be anything, uh, or maybe let's make it like this. He wants this kind of a thing, and he's saying, I'm regular to pay you a regular cost. So I'm not interested in preemptible VMs. I want a regular VM. Now, unfortunately, at that point of time in that data center, there's no enough resource. Maybe there is partial resource available, something like 2 vCPU, 12 GB RAM is available. This is available, spare, it is still there. But there is two more vCPU required and 4 GB required. Now what Google is going to do is, who's going to take the what's the priority? If somebody is going to pay a regular price and somebody paying a discounted price, preference always go to the regular customer, right? So what Google is going to send you is a 30 seconds uh, notice. And this is not an email, not a Slack message. This is going to be a log message. Basically, this is going to be received in the VM. So what will happen is, it's a notice to say that the system will be taken back. When it is taken back, what is going to be taken back is only your vCPU, and your memory is going to be taken back by Google. But your disk, your persistent disk is with you only. So if you're doing some processing, the data would be in your persistent disk. So what you should do basically in this 30 seconds is write your information. If you're doing something in the memory, if there's some processing happening in the memory, dump it, dump uh, it to your persistent disk in 30 seconds, or maybe I would say 25 seconds. Just give some buffer so that you are all good with the data persistent. This is what should be happening. Now, if you don't do it, Google is going to forcefully take it back, leaving your disk, and this vCPU and memory is going to be attached to that new customer who's ready to pay a regular cost. This is what basically happens behind the scene, folks. Uh, Nothing used, they, instead of being idle, at least they will get 20% benefit. So that's why they give you up to 80% discount. So this is something similar to your AWS, folks from AWS. This is equivalent to your spot VMs, spot instances in AWS EC2. I don't know the equivalent of this in Azure. If somebody has used this, let me know. But what I have seen in AWS, I have heard from people who has used AWS is, it is little difficult here. Plus, you have to do some kind of a bidding and do get it. Only then you will be able to get it. The process of getting a spot VM is little difficult. But when it comes to GCP, it is just a drop down, folks, or a flag which you need to pass, and it's going to go get provision. But depends totally on the utilization on that specific data center, whether how long this virtual machine is going to last. And going back to the other scenario, if nobody comes, no customer comes and asks, there's no requirement for this VM of your configuration, even if nothing happens, right? Nobody claims it, your VM will be shut down after 24 hours. The maximum you can have utilize the 80% discount is maximum for 24 hours. Basically, what kind of workloads you can do? Any workload which is an ad hoc, which requires little more capacity, processing capacity kind of stuffs, you can go for it. But never ever try to deploy something which is like a database, a website, which expects you to have 24/7 365 days uptime. That kind of a stuff is not a good choice here. You can use Hadoop jobs. Basically, Hadoop is basically fault tolerant system. Any Hadoop jobs you can run, because even if a virtual machine goes down, there are certain worker nodes which can continue working on it. So that's your preemptible virtual machine. Very important. And yesterday Vijay was asking, do we talk about cost optimization? This is one of the stuffs where you can optimize your cost using your preemptible virtual machine. Custom machine type is another one which is going to optimize your cost. Basically, there's one question. Let me just answer it. Can we attach the network disk to a PVM? Then when Google dumps the machine, will the local SSD also get dumped? But will the network disk be remaining? Okay, that's a good question. The question, if I rephrase it, what if I have a preemptible virtual machine with a local SSD disk? what is going to happen? So once the machine is shut down, the local SSD disk would be lost. So what's going to happen is basically something like this. So if you have a PVM, its configuration is this one. A persistent disk, basically the boot disk where you want 10 GB, then some data disk, data persistent disk, 20 GB. You have a local SSD disk, which is 375 GB. That is the minimum you can get basically. So this is what you have. Now when Google takes it back, meaning what happens is all these are going to be there, but only this is going to go off. Go off. Sorry, go off. This is going to go off, but the data in your uh, persistent disk, the boot details, the boot disk, your data is going to be there, but your data in your local SSD is going to be erased. Is going to be erased. That's what is going to happen, Aman, if Google takes it back. When you attach these all disk back to a new VM or start your VM preemptible virtual machine again, your local SSD disk is going to be empty. What will happen if the backup is not taken in 25 seconds before? The data would be lost. That's it. What you had in your memory, what you are processing will be lost. That's it. So what you have dumped only would be there. Now, if you have some kind of a workload which keeps on dumping everything onto a persistent disk, then you have no problem. But if you do some processing, in-memory processing, uh, you have to dump it. Otherwise, your data is going to be lost. Simple. That's it, Mangesh. So that's your persistent disk, sorry, preemptible virtual machine and regular virtual machine. And you cannot convert, I'll show you that in the demonstration. This has to be a design factor. If you want preemptive, tell me first. You cannot change a regular virtual machine into a preemptible or vice versa. This is something during the provisioning only. When you provision the virtual machine, you have to have it at that time only. Later, you cannot convert it. So there's one question. Preemptible virtual machine is not extensive, is not used for extensive batch processing, right? Ad hoc. If it's a batch processing, but it is ad hoc, once in a while you get it, you want to do it, you can go for it. I can just give you a small example here, folks. A professor from Harvard University, if I'm not wrong, uh, professors, right? So mathematicians, all those things. So this person tried to generate the highest pi value using preemptible virtual machine. So, and it was totally an ad hoc one. So you can think of that kind of a use case. For example, simple use case I can give is if it's a video processing you're doing and it's not something like critical, but your whenever there is criticality is less, but cost optimization is the most important thing, you can go with preemptible virtual machine. Meaning criticality, why I'm saying is if somebody says in next 2 hours I need this report, then you cannot go and play with preemptible virtual machine running some stuff. Go for a regular virtual machine, get it provision, run it, and give it in 2 hours. But if they say take your time, I'm sure it's going to be very less sometimes like this. But if they say it's not that critical, take it. But to do this processing, if you can have a cost optimized solution, it's going to be good. So that's where preemptible virtual machine comes handy. Usually like Hadoop processing, all those things is what is going to be helpful, Mangesh. Your same thing, but ad hoc workloads, ad hoc batch workloads. So that's one thing. Because it is preemptible virtual machine, and I mentioned Google is going to send only 30 seconds notice. 30 seconds notice. What you are going to need to do is you need to have a shutdown script. I'll just come to the slide in a minute. So you need to have a shutdown script. That's going to be very, very important because the system is going to shut down in 30 seconds. So when you are shutting down, you need to make sure there is a script which is going to, the moment this signal goes, a soft signal goes, from Google saying that the machine is going to be shut down in the next 30 seconds, this script is going to get executed. The script can be in a local system, in the systems, the script, if it's a Linux, it's going to be a .sh file. If it's a Windows, it's going to be a batch file. It can be in the system itself, in the virtual machine itself, or you can have the shutdown script in the storage bucket. Your choice which one you want to prefer, but you can go with the shutdown script basically. So this is going to dump all the data. So what kind of script I should have inside this? What is your processing? What you want to dump it? That you put it here. Similarly, anyway, if you have a shutdown script, you will also have a support for startup script, meaning when the virtual machine starts up, you need to have these things installed, or you should update your system, whatever it is. Maybe you have a disk which you want to attach every time. Whatever the things which you want in a startup, you can put it. So the exam tip here is uh, this one which is highlighted in bold color, metadata shutdown script URL. So if you want to have a standard shutdown script, maybe you may have lots of preemptible virtual machines in your project. Now, instead of keeping it locally in every virtual machine, keep it in a Google Cloud storage bucket and access it. Now, if you want to update it, you can also update it very easily, right? So possible questions can come from this. Possible questions can come from this. There are a couple of questions. Let me answer it once I show you this slide. I told Google is going to send a 30 seconds notice and it's going to get shut down. Now, if you want to know when Google sent it, when things happened, you can look into the logs. I will talk about logs at a later point of time. So in the logs, you are going to see something like this: compute engine preempted system at google.com. So this was the user who preempted and shut down the system. So you can get this kind of information in the logs basically. So this is called as system event logs. So you will get this kind of an information. So maybe if you want to do this kind of a stuff, why I'm showing you this information is, when Google preempts it, in 30 seconds it's going to shut down. Now if you want to again start it, you can use this log information. You can read this log information. If anything of this sort exists, have a automated script which is going to start my virtual machine again. When you start the virtual machine again, it's going to be again a new preemptible virtual machine whose life can be maximum for 24 hours. So it is something like this, folks. So you have a preemptible virtual machine just started at the time now is 8 o'clock. Let me take it as 8 a.m. You started it. Now what happens is it is running maybe at 8:35 a.m. Google sends a notice, so it's going to come down, meaning your preemptible virtual machine will be in shutdown state, shutdown. Now this is going to generate a information like what you are seeing here, preempted. Now you have certain systems in GCP itself called as cloud functions, pub/sub kind of stuffs, where you can read this log information. We'll talk about that more. You can read this. This is basically an event, right? So you can read this, read the log, and trigger cloud functions. Cloud functions, and go and start your preemptible VM using REST API. Start, that's it. So every time it stops, you go and start it. So this kind of approach, if you have, you can use this preemptible virtual machine for a longer time. But it's going to have downtime, up and down, up and down. So it's never going to be always up. Okay, so this is what you can use with your preemptible virtual machine. Now let me just answer a few questions which has popped up, 3 questions. So the first question, is there any possible, is that possible I can use preemptive VM for auto scaling? Answer is no. So this is not good for auto scaling purpose. You have to use a regular virtual machine because it will keep going down. So if it keeps going down, it's going to be an overhead. And if you have a website which is going to hit a huge stuff, and Google all of a sudden preempts it. So that's the reason I mentioned, if you're hosting a website, a database, preemptible virtual machine is not a good fit. So answer is no, Vijay. The next question is from Aman. So will the shutdown script execute automatically before the shutdown? Yes, that is a whole purpose. So this is a soft signal sent, and before the virtual machine gets shut down, the script, what you have mentioned in your script, is going to execute. So this is a mandatory thing. If you are putting, now you can leave it. Uh, if there's a preemptible virtual machine, you are playing around with it, you don't need to have shutdown script. But if you are very serious, you're using a preemptible virtual machine where you're going to do some processing, and before the VM gets shut down, you want to dump it. I would suggest make it as a mandatory thing that every preemptible virtual machine has a shutdown script. So before the shutdown, the script is going to get executed among. That is the whole reason why they are adding this shutdown script. There's one more question from Vijay. If I delete the VM and I use the persistent disk, will it also get the delete? Will it also get delete only when the VM deletes? I think it is only applicable for local SSD, right? You are absolutely correct. So if I rephrase the question slightly, what question which Vijay is asking is, I have a virtual machine. I have a virtual machine. I have a virtual machine. Let's assume a preemptible virtual machine itself. You have a PD. Now, if I delete the virtual machine, I can still retain my PD if I want. It is possible to retain it as long as it is not a local SSD. You are totally correct, Vijay. There's one more question. I understand that it is not recommended. It's not recommended preemptible for auto scaling, but can we use preemptible in auto scaling? Is that an option? No, there's no option in GCP currently. Uh, uh, which you can use. So basically for your managed instance group, you cannot use it basically. It has to be a regular virtual machine. There's one more question from Kumar. What will happen if there is no storage available after REST API starts the preemptible? Storage available, what do you mean by storage? In your persistent disk is what you're saying? Resize it. Resize it. We know you can resize the disk live. No problem. So you can use that as one more trigger. The storage is full, resize it. We are going to see that demo in next few minutes, how we are going to resize it. So you can resize it, not a problem. So that's a persistent disk. So you can resize it, Kumar. All right. Now it's demo time. So what we are going to do is series of demos. I'm not sure whether we'll be able to fully cover this today itself. What we are going to do first is provision a regular virtual machine, and that too with Cloud Shell is what we are going to do, where we will go through the entire fields, all the fields which is important. Then we'll provision a preemptible virtual machine, Windows virtual machine, and this is the only time we are going to provision a Windows virtual machine. We'll never use Windows virtual machine in the rest of our class. You will see the reason why at a later point of time. And we will use a option called as marketplace, more like our Play Store or App Store kind of a stuff, where you will get some pre-cooked images which you can easily do it. And the last demo is how do we resize the disk. It could be a boot disk, it could be a data disk without restarting a virtual machine. So 5 demos is what we are going to see. First, let's explore creating a regular virtual machine, and it's not going to be the style which we have been doing so far, where we have left most of the options default. We are going to explore each and every field and get an understanding when to use what, all those details. Okay, so let me just provision my virtual machine. Click. Now this is going to be a totally different style. uh, Deep dive into our virtual machine. Each and every column we are going to go through it. So let's wait for the screen to come up. I'll explain every field one by one, and then we'll go. So the first part is the name of your virtual machine, which is totally permanent. So if I just create something like batch 6 GCE hyphen regular hyphen cloud shell. Now the name is cloud shell, but we will provision every field and then get the rest, the command line equivalent of it. So we are going to provision it in cloud shell only. So this is the VM name, and this is permanent, meaning Once the VM is created, you cannot change the virtual machine name. And the virtual machine name does not need to be globally unique. It can be anything. You can mention it as test. You can also use this, no problem. But the recommendation is make sure what is the content here it's going to have. I'm going to have something like a web server, Apache web server. I'm going to mention it as web server. Have some naming conventions, folks. Google does not give you any recommendation. It's going to be something specific to an organization. Uh, have something which is going to convey very easily what is the purpose of this virtual machine. So it's going to have a web server, it's going to have a database. Mention that. So somebody else who's going to come and look into this is going to help them to understand, okay, this is the purpose of this. So mention it. Maybe if it is created by a team, uh, um, marketing team for marketing or something, mention that part. That's going to be really helpful. But the name is fixed. You cannot change it. But if you want to change it, there are few options. Easy change is not possible. There are some workarounds, which we'll talk again later, maybe in our next Saturday's class. That's the first information which cannot be changed once it is provisioned. The next one is labels. This is basically for there is a multiple use case of this labels. So first thing is, if you want to say this belongs to what kind of environment, is it a dev environment, is it a production environment? So you can use this. This is more like a labeling, like if you are a person who works more with this stick it, you keep on adding what's the to-do list which you want to do. You keep on sticking everything on your laptop, right? So which is going to give you what action you need to do it. Something very similar here. You're going to label your VM saying that the environment is this. What is the component you are going to use in this? I usually do this. What is a component? I'm going to install a web server. Then does it belong to a cost center? So every organization, at least not the startup, but medium scale and enterprise organization will have a cost center, and your billing also happens only to your cost center. So when you bill 40 hours or 45 hours every week, so cost center, this is going to give something like something like uh, R&D, GCP, R research. It could be something like this, research. Let me put a number, folks. CC hyphen some random number. That's it. So this is my cost center. Why this is helpful? Because if it's as an organization, I am using one account and I wanted to know which cost center is spending most of the money on GCP. In my billing, I can easily see this. I can put a filter out by this cost center so that I can know whether this cost center is overspending or they are spending it as per the expected expectation. So you can easily do it. So you can add n number of labels. Maybe you want to add who is the owner, who's the owner going to be. So this is going to be owned by research team at example. Okay, I cannot put at research team. Okay, research team. That's it. So I can put n number of labels. So put as much as labels possible. But I would say as a recommendation, at least put this environment, component, cost center. If cost center is not a major concern for you, at least these two stuffs is important. That's going to give an indication what you are going to install in it. Okay, so this is somewhat equivalent to in AWS called as tags. In GCP, tag has a different meaning, but people with AWS background, this is your tags basically. So there is one question from Vijay. Is it possible to automate the label other than cloud functions looking for free one like policy? Currently not there, Vijay. You have to have something like you keep on monitoring your logs. If there's a virtual machine created and if the virtual machine is not having label, you add a label yourself. So cloud functions is the one which you are going to use basically. So you don't have any policy saying that if a virtual machine is created without label, shut it down. Currently, it is not there. So it's only a place for more of improvement there. Maybe Google can come up with that, but currently we don't have such policy, Vijay. So now I have added those labels. It's going to show me, and labels are free of cost. You don't. It's just a tag kind of stuff. That's it. And it is also going to be helpful for quick searching. One is for billing purpose. The other one is for indicating what kind of environment it is. The third one is quick search. In our case, we will only create one virtual machine or two virtual machine. But in a real use case, you will have lots of virtual machines. So searching those instances could be helpful if you just put a filter like get me all the components which is for web server. Get me all the components which is an environment which belongs to dev. Easy search is possible. So that's where labels comes into picture, and you can add n number of labels, and it is an optional field. All right. The next important thing which you're going to do is choose your region and zone. This is very, very important. Based on the customer's requirement, uh, if they have certain compliance saying that it has to be in this specific country, first of all, you find out whether Google operates in that, has a region in that country. For example, if the customer is going to be in Switzerland, if they are going to be in Belgium or in Taiwan or in India, first you need to check whether they have a presence. Google has a presence there. 24 regions. Choose it and then select a data center, which is the zone. So for example, if I select, say for example, if the customer is in Thailand or Malaysia, then you will not have an option. Then you have to check with the customer, can I go with the closest region, maybe Singapore or Jakarta? If they say okay, then only you can go ahead. Otherwise you have to say it's not going to work. Then the only option is you have to use some other cloud provider who has a presence in Thailand or in Malaysia. So because sometimes the requirement is the data should not leave the country. So this is going to play a major role. I can just share one of my experience. Was working on an RFP, request for information. There at that time, Google did not had Switzerland as one of the regions. So, and it was specifically a data warehouse requirement. So we made it very clear in the proposal saying that uh, we don't have like Switzerland, but the closest one is going to be Frankfurt. Looking at your map, you can easily make it out. So Frankfurt, Germany is what we propose, and we were able to submit it. So making it very clear in your design document is going to be helpful, or in your proposal document is going to be helpful. So if I just look into this one, regions and zone, um, I'm in part of some forums. I usually see some emails in sorry, something in Stack Drive, Stack Overflow, all those things. There was somebody who was asking a question. Uh, I guess now you know most. There's some good amount of enhancements going on in South Africa, if I'm not wrong. Some more business, all those things are happening. So maybe with that background, somebody asked, there's no option to create, there's no region in South Africa. What can I do? So one of the possible answers which they mention is the closest, there is nothing currently. And the person was not from Google, so he was not able to get any internal information. Maybe Google may have a plan, roadmap to have a region in South Africa soon. But what was the answer which that person gave was the closest region is Mumbai. Just looking at the map, it can give you an idea there. So the way I did was the same thing. Frankfurt and Singapore, sorry, Frankfurt and Switzerland was very close. We proposed Frankfurt. The latency is going to help you out. So by looking at the map, you can decide what's the region. This is one way of doing it. The second way of doing it is there's an option called as GCP ping. So it's not an official documentation. GCP ping. Yeah, this is a nice tool to find out the latency. So what's going to be the latency for you? You can use this tool to find out if I create a virtual machine in this region, what's going to be my latency. So Currently it shows uh, if I create a virtual machine, you can try it yourself also, folks. If you are from different parts of the world, you can give a try. It's going to show you different results. The closest one for you. So if you are in US, it may show the closest region for US. If you are in India, it's going to be mostly showing as Mumbai. 50 milliseconds is my latency. So the next one is going to be Singapore. So this can also give you the idea, if I provision it in this region, what's going to be my latency. So I'm going to get a better experience there. So that's where this region comes into picture. So select the region. So I will select Singapore because I know there's some issue with Mumbai region. The zones, sometimes the VMs does not get provision. I can show you that demo also if possible. So when I select the region, I will have 3 zones. Every region will have minimum 3. There's only one region which is not having, which is having more than 3. That is US Central. A, B, C, and F. And why, if you ask me, I don't have an answer, but I can give uh, an answer which I can think could be possible. Just for your information, US Central was the first region which Google launched way back in 2007 or 8. So this was the first region. Maybe when they started, they thought having 4 zones or 4 data centers is better. That's why they started with it. Later, they realized that it's not going to be very feasible to have always 4 zones. They reduce it to 3. Maybe this could be one possible answer, and this is not an official one, possible answer which I am thinking of. So you may get this kind of questions. Who knows? You need to be very innovative in giving some answers where there's no official answer, but could be the possible things why they would have thought of. That's one thing, one possible answer. Uh, the second thing is the name is slightly weird. F. Okay. Now, if I go to anything else, Belgium was a second region. Okay, here also they had slight weird names. The second reason possible, which I think is, it is like your iPhone example. So whatever you do, iPhone is going to be the cheapest. The price for iPhone is going to be cheap only in US. If it is in other parts of the world, it's going to be a little expensive. So same thing applies to GCP also. Whenever any new service comes, they will first launch in US Central. That's the first place it gets launched, and they may would have kept this extra zone data center for testing purpose. So this is a zone for only testing these beta products, all those things. Maybe that is the possible thing, is what I feel. 2 options. You keep it at the back of your mind. Maybe whenever it comes, you can just uh, position this. There is one this thing from Vijay. You are right. AWS is having 4 data centers. So they are having 4 data centers for every region. Vijay, for every region. Only for one. Only in US Central. Okay. Okay, that's a good observation. Okay, then it could be a good possible thing. So that could be only for testing purpose, maybe. So, and it's not an official answer, folks. This is something which I thought of, could be basically. Oh, only in US Central. That's a good observation. Thanks, Vijay. So I can easily share this when I'm talking to somebody else again. So done. Now you wanted, assume for simplicity reason, I'm going to say Singapore, Singapore, and you have 3 zones. Now, once you have decided the region, is deciding the zone so important? You may ask, because it's in Singapore. As per the data compliance, we are in the country itself. The data is not going to leave the country. All those things is fine. But should I choose a specific zone or not? If the question is that, I would say definitely choosing the zone is also very important. Why? Let me just show you that. Let me select Singapore A zone. So we have a tip. Every zones are going to end with an alphabet. Regions are going to end with a number. So just choose a zone. What happens is zones are nothing but data centers. So the ultimate aim of any cloud provider is all the zones or the availability zone should be identical. but in reality it's not going to happen. So they may fall short of some resource, some infra, all those things. So there's going to be little dissimilarity between the zones. Meaning, for example, if I select Singapore A, I can get general purpose machines, compute optimized machine types, memory optimized. Uh, if I just make it to B, something very similar is what I get. If I go to C, I get GPUs also, meaning I can provision graphical processing unit only in Singapore C zone. Now, if you are looking at a proposal and if the customer says we need GPUs because we are going to do some video processing, all those things. Now your zone becomes very important. So as a cloud architect, this is where you put your fine-grained information saying that in the design document, VMs should be always provisioned in the specific zone. Now you have to do this part yourself. Uh, what regions are available, what is available in which region. So there's a documentation, complete documentation which gives it. You don't need to play around with the user interface. You can look into the documentation to find out in which region what is available. So that is one important option. But I usually prefer to use the UI. Sometimes it's more easier to find it out. So make sure the zone, this was just a one small example, the GPU available. I can just also talk about some other thing. So if I just go to A zone, right? Uh, compute optimized. Under compute optimized, I get these options. Memory optimized, I get only one option, which is M1 mega memory, which is 96. 96 indicates the vCPU count. 96 vCPU, 1.4 terabytes, folks. 1.4 terabyte. It's not GB, it's terabytes of memory. A good one. But this itself, we feel it is very high. But if you see some healthcare organizations, all those things, they may need more. If I switch my zone to B, I will get something more. So the ultimate thing which I can get in GCP is 160 vCPU, 3.75 terabytes. I have heard few of them saying that in the entire data center in their on-prem, if they add up all the memory, it may not even come to 3.75 terabytes. But Google can give you one powerful machine which is of this range. So zones are going to be important, deciding what is the machine types, features like GPUs availability or not. So this is going to be important. Let me just stop here. If somebody has a question on the zones, folks. Uh, so just don't choose a random zone. For learning purpose, it's okay. But when you are designing something, make sure as per the requirement whether they can be fulfilled in that zone. So if you don't mention zone, people will take it for granted. So if you mention specifically, it's going to be a good option, basically. Okay, so that's very important. With the zone, I'm going to choose, if we have a customer from Hong Kong and Canada and would like to use one region, uh, okay, only one region. If they were to use it, uh, can I have 4 TB or maximum? So if it's Hong Kong, if it's Hong Kong, in Hong Kong, memory optimized system itself is not available, Kumar. And Canada, we don't have a region currently. Toronto is yet to come, is what I understand by looking at this. Toronto is yet to come. So no options itself for the question which you have, the customer. So because memory optimized is not available in every zones, and sometimes in some specific regions it's not even available. So answer would be, at least with GCP, no. If they are okay to do with Taiwan, it's somewhat possible. It's somewhat possible there, Kumar. Can I have 4 terabytes or max is 2. Okay, usually, right? Max is 3.75 terabytes, Mohammed. Uh, uh, not 4, basically.
Mahesh, can I ask one small question? It
Yeah,
is
yeah,
getting difficult to type it if you don't mind.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah, yeah.
so I have a customers in Hong Kong and Canada, as mentioned an example. But
Uh-huh.
if we do not have a common region, for example, I created one instance, server instance in Hong Kong related place, one instance in US related place. For example, two servers I created, for example.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But I wanted to maintain one single data. Okay, but when it comes
Uh-huh.
to storage, I wanted to maintain my data into one storage only. Is it possible like that?
One storage, I would say you are referring to a database, is
Yeah,
what you're
yes,
saying.
correct. Yeah, yeah,
Ah,
yeah.
so what you have to decide is you have to decide the database, whether it has to be in the US or in the Hong Kong. So uh, so if it's a database, you have to decide that. But if it's more of static contents like videos, all those things, you can decide a multi-region. So your database is going to be usually a zonal resource. So you have to decide which uh, region you have to decide that. So one
Mm.
commonality is not possible, I would say. So it has to be a specific zone, either US or Hong Kong if it's a database. If it's something like static content, put it in something called as a Google Cloud Storage, where it could be a multi-regional resource. It could be in US or it could be in Asia, something like that. But common
Magesh,
one single thing, not possible.
Magesh,
True, but
actually,
yeah.
yeah, just want to update one thing. If you're moving any data, this will comes under regulatory issues in case of
Mhm.
any, for example, UK if you use GDPR policies,
Correct.
and here also we cannot move the data from from this country to another country. So which means like we cannot keep our data in a common location.
That's also possible. That's also a valid point. But to answer Kumar's question, basically you have to it is going to be in one region basically a common, there's nothing like common this thing, so Kumar, so
Okay, so the
it has to
database
be either
can.
close to,
Okay,
it has to be
okay.
yeah, it has to be close to either one of the region basically. And Vijay's
Okay.
point is also important. If they say
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
if
exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, correct.
yeah,
The regulator, yeah, regulator requirement. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks,
yeah.
Vijay.
Yeah, so there's one more question from Vijay. How to check the available regions, respective zones? Example, in case of to deploy a VDI, how can I check if the service is available in Mumbai region? So the documentation is the only one which can help you out whether a specific feature is supported there or not. So you have to look for the documentation. So anyway, this is not going to be as in the exam whether GPUs are available in Singapore or GPUs are not available. So nobody is going to ask it. So you are going to do a decision when you're writing a design document, right? So you have ample time there. So documentation is the only one which helps you, Vijay, as of now. But as you progress, right, you may create your own doc as a quick reference, all those things. But currently, it's only documentation. All right. How can we set up VMs for 365 days batch processing out of 24? Or 24 batch processing will only run for 15 hours a day. So go for a regular virtual machine, Mangesh. And if it runs only for 15 hours a day, what you can have is a script. After the batch processing is done, shut it down. Next day, again start it up. So meaning 9 hours, you are going to save time, save your compute option. So you can have an automated script. So you have to write that part. So where it's going to start every day, maybe at midnight, the 12 o'clock, and 15 hours it's going to execute. Afterwards, it's going to shut down. Then again next day. So you have a script to start and stop your virtual machines there. So that way you can have it running forever. It's basically you should go with regular virtual machines, basically. And why certain stuffs are not there as a ready-made stuff is basically otherwise we will lose jobs. If everything is Google going to provide everything as an automated script, documentation, like tools, all those things, we will not have any job. Everything is going to be automated. Nobody is going to hire us. So to prove ourselves, we can also do some part. That's where these scripts, all those things are left open. And it's going to be little customized also. They have just left it like that. And yesterday I was looking into one of the announcement. I usually look into this news very frequently. One of the announcement was like this. It is a cool one. I would strongly suggest you to look into this. Uh, Lots of scripts, sample codes are available. I usually use this. So there are lots of scripts available. If you just go to this page, this is as recent as yesterday. Now okay, I have to mute you people if there's a background noise. Okay. Lots of sample codes are there. You can search for that. For example, if you want to write something on cloud functions, basically to write some code. So you get lots of stuffs which you can try. Parse a pub/sub message. So this can be helpful for doing some stuff, looking into the logs, reading it, do something. You can get lots of stuffs, ready-made codes available, leverage it. So this is what you can do basically, folks. So that's where the zone comes into picture very much there. And sometimes, right, you have to look into the documentation very carefully. I can share one real experience which I had. So I worked in a Google partner organization, so where I used to interact with the Googlers, the Google sales, all those things straightforward. And there was a quote which they had shared, and this was for a customer in India. So because it's India, they prefer to use Mumbai region, so it's part of the country itself. So data compliance, all those things was fulfilled there. So the requirement they had was basically they wanted to have specific graphical processing unit, GPU. So what this quote came from Google was they did not mention anything about the zone. If I see the GPU availability, is GPU gone? Is it there? GPU was there. Okay, yeah, GPU is there. So if I select Mumbai A zone, GPUs, I don't have GPU. So if you see in Mumbai A, I cannot have a GPU itself provision, similar to your Singapore. So if I select Mumbai B, again GPU is not available. Mumbai C, GPUs are not available. Okay, there is some issue. Maybe it was available for some short time, folks. They removed it. Maybe because of the issue. Okay, so I can choose Singapore itself, folks, for GPU example. Singapore. So GPUs, the kind of GPUs which you are going to have also going to matter. What kind of GPUs? Whenever you talk about GPUs, the only organization which comes to everybody's mind is NVIDIA. So Google provides you different flavors of NVIDIA based on this thing. So I guess why the regions are not showing up. The different flavors. Okay, better I'll choose US Central, folks. This thing. So there were other series available to enable virtual workstation. There are different series of NVIDIA cards available. Oh, Tesla, only one. There are P series, some other series available. Choose okay to enable virtual this thing. Choose a different GPU, such as okay, fine. The GPUs are one part which can help you to decide what's going to be the zone. So the zone is important. To get the right zone, you have to look into the documentation. What is a zone? Because a machine type and GPUs are going to play a major role when it comes to the zone, the specific zone, look into the documentation, and this is nothing to be done with the exam. So nobody's going to ask this question, so don't worry about it. But this is a designing process when you do it. So, and this zone and region are permanent. When you mention, yes, I want it in Singapore A, that's it. You cannot change it. Straightforward way, you cannot change it. So it's literally like in a data center. Data center is a physical building, right? You can, if you have the authorization, you can go to that building and see the server which is provisioned in which rack. So from moving a virtual machine or changing the virtual machine details from one zone to another zone literally looks like not possible. So that's the reason this region and zones are permanent. But there are options which you can do at a later point of time. Workaround options are there. But deciding these things are important, and this is permanent. For this virtual machine, this is permanent. You cannot change it. Whenever I say permanent, some are real permanent stuffs, and some few things can be modified with some extra steps. The name, your region, zone can be changed, but not so easily, but changeable. Let's go with our machine type options, the various machine types. E2 is what they say is going to be something very effective. You can use it, but I usually prefer to use N1 series and F1 micro. So F1 micro. So there's a question, maybe should I answer this? What is the solution if we provision VM in a car? I'll tell you about that. You can change it. We'll talk about that. If something goes wrong, how can you change it? We'll talk about that. Possibilities are there. Most of the time, I would say 99% you can easily change it. 1% there could be a chance where you have to re-provision it completely from the scratch. Most of the time it is possible. So we'll choose N1 series and F1 micro. Why? To make the cost optimization, just to have a smaller VM only. That's the reason I'm using with this option. All right, maybe I can use N1 standard for now. Later I'll change it. So N1 standard meaning 1 vCPU. Similarly, if I see something like N1 high memory 16 means 16 vCPU basically. So let's go with N1 standard 1. And we have talked about the GPU part. You can get GPUs based on in which region you are, in which zone you have selected. And I cannot use GPU with free trial account, so let's ignore that. Coming to the CPU platform, you can leave it as automatic. Google is going to take the best one. But if you prefer to use a specific one, yes, I want Intel Skylake only. This kind of information, if you were to do it, you have to get that info from your on-premise. If you're doing a migration, get to know what was a processor used. If the customer is very particular, we want this specific processor only, check for it. Leaving usually it's automatic is the best way, but if it's a migration, the customer may be interested in a specific processor. And this is going to impact your clock speed, which I mentioned. So for example, if I go to N2 series, I will see something like Intel Cascade or later. These are processors. If I go to N2D, it's going to show me my AMD processors, AMD ROM or later. So this is going to decide your clock. So I'm going to mention that. I'm just going to leave it as N1 standard 1. That's it. What else? This, when you mention this machine type, right, you can immediately see what is your price. What is your price for 1 vCPU, 3.75 GB of RAM? So N1 standard is usually going to be of this sort. So this is your CPU count, vCPU and memory count. By default, the virtual machine would be always Linux and Debian operating system. So they take only 10 GB for their boot disk. So 10 GB of standard persistent disk, which is your HDD. It's going to say $0.44 per month. And you're going to get a sustained usage discount. So if I just mouse over on it, if I just leave this VM running for 30 days, 300 30 days or 31 days, it's going to give me up to 30% discount without me talking to a salesperson from Google. So it's automatically applied. So 30% discounted, and this is what I'm going to get as a bill if I just leave this virtual machine running right from on the first day of the month. Usually to get the fullest potential of sustained use discount, it's a hidden secret. You have to always start it on the first day of the month. So if you start it now, it is like today is what, 6th, you may not get up to 30% because the billing cycle ends every month. So you have, it's going to be prorated for you. So if you want to get the full potential, start it on the first month. Maybe it's a small hint. If you want to start or launch a project, start it on the first. And that too, if it's having lots of virtual machines, start it on the first of the month. So this is what you get basically, and this is totally controlled by your vCPU and memory. Now, if I just change it to F1 micro, you see this, folks, $5. Even for that, I get a discount, sustained users discount. So even if I forget it to stop this virtual machine, this is what we are going to do in the beginning stage. $5 only is going to be taken off from my $300 of credit. So that's the reason most of the time I use F1 micro, but for this demonstration, I may need standard one. I'm just going to use this, but definitely I'll stop it. So this is your machine type, which can be changed, and it's not permanent, can be changed, but to change it, you have to stop the virtual machine. So we'll see that more in detail. So this is your machine type setting. Good. GPUs we saw. The next option which you see is display device. This is basically if you want to have a dual device kind of a stuff, so dual monitor, or you want to do screen capturing. So when the system boots up, right, when the system boots up, if there is some issue with the system, you want to see what is the thing, because you will not be in front of the system. It's running somewhere in a data center or in a availability zone. What was the issue which was causing my system not to boot up? So if you turn on this, you can take screen capture. It is going to take screen capturing, and it's going to be dumped into a storage bucket kind of a stuff where you can see, okay, why the system is not working. So that could be one possible use case of this display device. The possible other use case is you can have a virtual display, virtual monitor, or virtual display of two options. So that's where this comes into pictures, and they also mentioned it could be used for recording tools. I have not used it, but this could be really helpful for debugging Windows system. Usually the Windows system will show in the boot process some errors. Linux machines will have lots of run levels, right? It can show you what went wrong if it is turned on. This is one handy option. I have not used it very extensively, but there's a possible option there. So that's on your CPU, vCPUs, all those vCPU, GPUs, all those things. And here Google has not made it very clear. It has to be vCPU, but they mention it as CPU and platform. So they could have made that consistency there. The next one is confidential VMs, which was a new feature launched in 2020 Google Next event. So this is basically uh, as the name itself indicates, it's going to be the keys, the encryption keys are not going to be managed by Google. So this is basically going to leverage basically AMD processor. So if I enable it, enable confidential computing service, series is N2D, which is AMD. Only with AMD it is going to work, and specifically this machine types, anything of this range. So something which is recently added, so I'm not going to discuss much about it because it's not going to come in the exam. If you want, you can enable it. I've tried enabling it once, so it was having some limitation with my free trial, so I never explored it much. So confidential VMs, I would say this could be a good fit if you're doing something in European Union kind of a stuff, or for some kind of a defense agency. This could be helpful. Primarily leverages AMD processors. That's the option. The next one is containers. We don't know what is container. I've just given you at a very, very high level. If you have a container, packaged everything as a container, you can deploy it on virtual machines also. That is the main thing here. So if I check this, it's going to show me a link to a image, a Docker image. We'll talk about this checkbox once we understand containers. So I'm just not going to discuss more on this because most of us may not come from a container background. So we'll just skip this for now. The next part is boot disk. I'll explain about the boot disk and we'll take a break, folks. The boot disk is basically what is the OS you want, the kernel. So by default, it is always going to be Debian 10. And maybe if you look into this recording at a later point of time, it could be the next version of Debian. So when I started, it was Debian 9 or 8. Now it is, they have made it as Debian, Debian 10. It's a free distribution. And when I click on that, if I were to change to something else, these are the operating systems which you get. Most of them are Linux. Most of them are Linux. CentOS, container optimized, we'll talk about when we discuss about containers. Debian, Red Hat, Red Hat Enterprise. You have Ubuntu, Windows, all those things. What you don't have is Solaris. What you don't have is Windows version, desktop version of Windows. So if I select, say for example, Red Hat Linux, I have this enterprise version of it. So you are going to get this specific version, and the build, all those details are going to be there. And you are also have something called as shielded VMs in GCP. What is shielded VMs are basically when you have this, and basically now they have made this as default feature. So if I just mouse over on this, images with shielded VM features include trusted 1 minute folks, my throat is totally gone. So here what you get is, if you feel at any point of time the OS is compromised by a rootkit malware kind of stuffs, you feel hardening the system is very important, you can turn on this shielded VM feature. This is basically hardening your system. So what do you mean by hardening? So you don't install any unwanted softwares. Any software which can create problems, you clean it up. You have only what you want, you install it. So that way you can make sure the system is not getting hacked by malwares, rootkits, all those things. So this is a feature which is turned on by default. So you get that free of cost, and you can change your boot disk size what you want. If it's Red Hat, it's going to be minimum 20, and you get the option of having your boot disk on a standard persistent disk, which is HDD, SSD persistent disk, solid state drive, or balanced. Between both of them, there's going to be in between persistent disk which you get. Price wise, IOPS wise, it's going to be in between. So you have three options. And this is the important thing. These are all network attached. So meaning if this VM crashes, if the VM crashes, no problem. I can easily attach my disk to something else easily. This is something possible. Somebody asked this question. So how can we attach it? This is on the base, same thing. And you will not see local SSD because it is machine attached. You'll always create your boot disk on a network attached option only, not on a machine attached storage. So if I select, yeah, anyway, I have selected Linux. Let me just go and show you the price. When I use a premium version or a licensed OS, there's going to be a usage fee, the OS usage fee also. So when I use Debian, this price was not there. When I use these enterprise versions or licensed OS, I'm going to have a cost. So $43. So from $30, it becomes $74. Similarly, if I use Windows are also going to be premium versions, so enterprise editions. So I will have basically different Windows options. All are server editions, folks. There's no desktop version. Windows 10, Windows 8, 7, all those things. Only in Azure you get this. but in AWS and in GCP, you don't get a desktop version of it, basically. So you will have Windows 2012, 16, and 19. 2008 is end of life, so that's the reason you don't get it. So all you get is basically the server editions of it. So if I select the latest one, Windows 2019 data center edition, I will have a slight change in my price. So there is also usage cost, and we don't want to pay the usage cost. What we do basically is we use a open source or free distribution Linux kernels like Debian, Red Hat, Debian, CentOS, uh, Fedora, or CentOS, Ubuntu. So I usually use Debian. Just leave it as default. That's it. Now, when it comes to a persistent disk, I can go up to 64 terabytes. 64 terabytes is what I can have. Minimum is 10. You have to always have 10. That's our OS, and deciding the OS is going to have a price implication. And if the VM, the image which you are using is going to be shielded, you're going to get this armor icon. It is indicating it is a shielded VM. So if I use Debian 9, it is not shielded. So if I select it, it's going to show me as a normal VM. So there are very limited unshielded VMs. Most of them from April 2020, Google has made it as shielded. So extra protection basically. So let's leave it as Debian only, Debian 10 only, and see what is going to happen. So we'll stop it here. Once we come back after a break, 10 minutes break, we'll explore the remaining concepts, folks. So stop the recording.
This conference will now be recorded.
Now, before the break, we stopped at the boot disk, what kind of OS we can have. And one of the important thing which I also mentioned was the shielded VMs. So if you just do a quick search of shielded VM, shielded VM GCP, in simple terms, what is shielded VMs? It's a name which Google gives. It's basically your hardened virtual machines on Google. Now, this name is very important. The feature which you get, the reason is in Cloud Architect, this thing, right? You get 3 case studies, Cloud Architect, GCP Cloud Architect case studies. The 3 case studies, it's like our childhood days where we have chapters where the teacher used to say in from chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, you're going to get questions. Prepare it. From any corner of these chapters, you'll get a question. It is the same thing here. So you're going to have 3 case studies called as, let me just show you that. 3 case study, Mount Crick Games, Dress for Win, and Terramuth. Just give me a minute, folks. Afterwards, I'll answer. Mishra, I'll just answer your question if you have it. So 3 case studies are going to be there, and you may get questions from these case studies. Basically, what kind of good solutions you want to propose basically is what you're going to get. One such thing here is what we are learning, everything throughout. It's not like one day we are going to prepare for the exam. Throughout the session we are going to prepare. Just wanted to highlight that by just taking this small scenario. Somewhere you would have learned a feature that's going to come as a question here. So because this case study is going to come, I have seen it 2 times. One in the real one, other one is a recertification. Now if here I search for hardened, you see here in this case study they are expecting to have a hardened Linux distribution, meaning basically a shielded VM is what they are expecting, and that too it has to be Linux is what you are expecting. So this word and the concept which you are learning are connected, and that case study is very important. All 3 case studies are important. Basically we are preparing each and every step which we are taking is always towards a preparation. Sometimes also I'm going to share you some information on the live implementation stuffs. Yes, Vivek, you had a question.
these case studies also. Yesterday I was going through the case studies. Now they have launched a beta uh, solution architect case studies. So I had
Okay,
a uh,
I was not aware. So where it is?
just PCA GCP PCA. When I googled it, just then I saw two existing story and two new story they have introduced. That is in beta. I don't know. I know.
Okay, I cannot see it here. I don't know where was that. Oh, there's something professional cloud architect beta. Okay, this is the one architect. Oh,
Uh,
okay. Was
the-
okay. Let
I
me
just
see it.
wanted to, because I'm preparing for that. I thought I should ask. Beta is different, and the current one is different. Means
I just okay. There's two things. Okay, there are two things. I was not aware of it. Sorry. One is professional cloud architect. This is the one. Then there is one more thing. Cloud architect beta. Okay, we are launching a professional beta. This will be same as the current version. If you wish to take the current version, please enroll to this. The beta would be 3 hours exam. So
okay.
the thing is that why this beta has come up is I can just have my own this thing here. So beta exams are usually longer. So you will have more questions, but the price would be lesser. The whole reason why they give this kind of beta is this exam, right? Professional Cloud Architect is being there. The concept or the content is almost the same for almost like 2 years. I also made a video in my channel like 2018 when I took the first time, 2020 which I took the second time, the recertification. It was almost same, and I had seen couple of questions which I got it in my 2018. So they have not changed it for a long time. So I think it is time for them to change it. So before they change it, they wanted to introduce some new questions. That questions they are releasing it in this beta. So maybe once they understand, okay, this kind of questions people are able to easily answer it, this is difficult, all those things, maybe they will roll out this as the GA, next
Oh,
version of it. So that is
just
what I think basically from here. Yeah.
here, here the two new introduced new case study is going to be introduced.
Yeah,
So
so these are two. Okay. So dress for win is dropped in this. Dress for win is dropped. Dress
okay.
for
So
win is dropped. So if you see, dress for win is gone. It's only Teramath and Mountain Games basically. So previously, it was four case studies in 2018 before November 2018. So it was basically something like Monkey Games, Dress for Win, Teramath, and Genko Mats. Now they have a new one in a beta, this thing. So good to know. So we'll make sure we'll prepare ourselves for that. So first question, shielded VM, is it beta? No, it's generally available, Smith, so you can use it and it is free of cost. There's one more question from Anil. By when we should be ready for PCA exam? Uh, uh, Throughout, by the end of our session we should be completed, I would say. So or if the question was more towards a beta one, Anil, not sure. So if you are taking the and you have the option of taking two cloud architect stuff. One is cloud architect, the standard one which is still going on, which is mostly on the older questions. Then there is a beta version which is having a new thing, so you have the option of enrolling into two. So which one you want to go for, your choice. So because this is beta, prefer to use the generally available one. So people who have already taken and want to give a try something, it's going to be, yeah. So end of the session will be which month? Okay, it's going to be April basically. April is what we are going to finish it, our all our modules basically. Thanks, Mishra, for Vivek, Mishra, for bringing this. So I'll make sure I'll keep a watch on this and also look into is there any more information available, exam guide. So this, the whole intent is I'll make sure because it's almost like 2.5 months left for us, right? Or 2 months roughly. So who knows? By the time we finish everything, the new questions can come up. So I'll make sure we are prepared for both the stuffs. So
yes.
it should be an advantage. Yeah. So I
So
need to look into this exam guide. Yeah, I need
yeah,
to look into the exam
because
guide.
when they make it GA, then there would be
Yeah.
a uh,
Yeah, it is
understanding.
going to be having a, yeah, it's going to, yes, yes. I'll look into the difference and I'll make sure The course is slightly modified to both. I would say it's already there. It's already there is what I would say, because we talk about Cloud Run, we talk about cloud data fusion, all those things, which was not at all there. Even if the previous batch I have taken all those things. So we are almost there. Only thing is that maybe we have to discuss about this new 2 case studies which has been added. We need to look into that. Some EHR healthcare helicopter racing league, something there. We have to look into this basically. Thank you for letting me know. So I'll make sure I'll update it. Yeah.
One question regarding this. I saw
Yeah.
one of the old videos in which you saw that if you attach local SSD once, you cannot reattach. And again,
You cannot
and
stop it. You cannot stop it is what I would have mentioned.
okay, means I'm
You
not
cannot.
able to recall it, and I was not able to find it now today. Because when in a spare time I used to see your videos actually. So
Uh-huh.
so I was just wanted to recall that thing. What was that actually? What was you have explained
So
in
if you
that?
have a local SSD, attached, the VM cannot be stopped by default. But if you log into the VM and you can do a shutdown, it can get shut down. So when you shut down, what happens? The data get lost. So from the
Okay.
console, from the gcloud command, you cannot stop the VM. They have put that restriction for local SSD. Maybe I can show you that in the next class. A search for local SSD, you will get the video in the channel. What
Okay.
about Buster VM? Is this bustable VMs is what you're saying, Vijay? So these are usually VMs which is going to have some vCPU and memory, which is going to increase when more load comes. Usually your F1 and G1 are usually called as a bustable VMs. So slightly their vCPU are shared, so it is going to be like 0.5 or something, but more load comes by chance, it can go bust up to 1 vCPU. Those are called as bustable VMs, Vijay. Only shared. Others are not bustable. You get it. What you mentioned is what you get it basically. It's basically you can go up to 1 vCPU with F1 and G1's machines basically. So the reason why I highlighted this is every stuff which we learn, it's a step towards the certification basically. Hardened Linux distribution is nothing but our shielded VMs which Google gives us and which is free of cost and it is generally available. Leverage it. Next, coming to the next section is basically our API and identity and API access. We have explored this to a great extent in our cloud IAM itself, where you get to provision what is the identity of your virtual machine. So by default, it's going to be always Compute Engine default service account. You can also choose a different service account of your choice where you are not going to be controlled by access scope, which is a legacy one. We have seen it. Better to control it via IAM. So the same thing. We have already seen this, so I'm not going to spend much time on this part. This is covered. The next part is this is only for UI purpose only. Google has added again for making the onboarding process faster. So firewall rules, there are lots of ports available. So not only port 80 and port 443, there are lots of ports which you can run. But why Google only made these 2 ports available in the UI? It's just to learn things faster. So if I just click on this, it's going to create a firewall rule behind the scene, opening port 80 for this virtual machine. This is what is going to happen. Similarly, if you have a certificate, you can have HTTPS. And this is only for learning purpose, folks. Usually, I don't use this. I usually create the firewall rule behind the scene. Behind the scene. And since anyway, we are doing it for the first time, let's do it. Let's check this part. But this 2 options only opens 2 ports only, port 80 or port 443. That's it. If you want a customized port, you have to create your firewall rule yourself basically. And anyway, we are going to install an Apache web server which is going to listen on port 80. This checkbox is going to help us basically. So that's our firewall stuff. That's it. So you're almost there. Then the remaining part is the most important thing: management, security, disk, networking, and sole tenancy. So let's go one by one. Under management, so most of them is going to be hidden These are going to be hidden. You can change these things if you want. If you still want to customize it, you can see it under this management section. Under the management section, the first part is a description. So everybody, I would say, will move from one organization to another organization. When you're leaving the organization, if you have worked as a cloud architect or as a DevOps person in GCP, there may be a knowledge transition which you need to give to the next person, because you are leaving this organization, you want to move to a different organization. There's going to be a KT. So instead of writing a KT document everything, right, plan it accordingly to reduce your amount of work. Put a description when you're creating a virtual machine. This VM, this GCE will have uh, Apache web server for R&D. So this is going to act as a self-explanatory stuff to the person. Now you can just ask him or her, please look into the description. You'll get to know why this VM is used. So your work is getting reduced. So plan it accordingly so you can add these things very expensively there. So that's your first part, which is a description. You can add 2000 characters, if I'm not wrong, as a description. So you can write a history itself with 2000 characters. The next part is delete protection. This is basically to avoid any accidental deletes. Now, how many times we have created a virtual machine and how many times in front of you only have deleted it? So everybody will be working in a tensed environment. You'll be pressurized sometimes, but instead of deleting a VM in a production dev environment, you would have deleted something in some other environment. Because the naming conventions are same, you may get slightly confused sometimes. I have done such kind of blunders multiple times in my career, where in my beginning I have deleted the entire production database. So this is going to help us delete, uh, avoid any accidental deletes. Meaning I have to be fully cautious. So I cannot just go and click on a delete button or use a gcloud command to delete it. I have to come uncheck this, then only delete it. Very helpful when you provision a single virtual machine like this. If it's groups of virtual machine, there's a different option altogether. So if it's you're creating some individual virtual machines, I make sure I turn this on, because I know what background I come from. I always have the problem of deleting stuff, and I'll spend time in recreating it. So I started using this very extensively, so to avoid all the blunders which I usually do. So just to show you one simple thing, if you see my desktop would be usually clean. Only one recycle bin and couple of files, that's it. So I have the habit of deleting the file and recreating it. So I usually do, I just try to keep the desktop clean and accidentally I delete certain stuffs. This kind of stuffs I have done even with virtual machines basically. So this protection is going to be helpful for such people. So turn it on if it's a single virtual machine. If it's multiple, we have a different option. We'll talk about that later. Moving on to the next one, and this is totally free, folks. Just turn it on, nothing else. If you want to delete it, you need to click on the virtual machine, edit, and then delete it. That's how you do it, basically. The next part is basically, yeah, so we'll try to do it. So yeah, getting continuous cough, I'm not able to do it. Yeah, so it's fine. I just wanted to finish it so that we have, because once we take break, right, it keeps on continuing. Inertia, that's it. So keep moving. So the next part is reservation, folks. Now there are situations where you wanted to create a virtual machine in a specific zone. Unfortunately, in that zone at that point of time, all the resources are exhausted. So if you don't want to face such a problem, right, you can make sure you do a reservation of the CPU and memory well in advance. So that way, if your requirement is to always provision a resource in that specific region and specific zone, this reservation is going to come up very handy. How do you reserve it? Basically, you can just go to compute engine. You will have an option called as reservation. This one, committed use discount. Under this committed use discount, you have an option called as reservation. How much vCPU, how much memory you can reserve. You'll get that. Yes, there's going to be a charge for this reservation. It is like your train ticket, folks. So a simple example. So you are reserving it. The now which we are doing is on demand. You just get into a train, and if there's a seat, you can sit in. But if you reserve it, even if you miss the first station, the second station you can get in, and your seat is reserved for you. So because you do a reservation, there's an extra cost there. So definitely there's going to be a charge. And the charge is exactly like running a virtual machine. So if you just come to this committed use discount, one of the options is do a reservation. So when I click on reservation, I can mention how much vCPU and memory I want to do. This is literally like running a virtual machine, or reserving your vCPU and memory in a specific region. So reservation one, use specifically, if I use Mumbai, specifically in Mumbai A, how many instance you want, which series you want, you mention it and reserve it. You can also reserve GPUs, local SSD, and do it. So this way you can do it. You don't have a expiry date or anything. So unless you go and explicitly delete it, you will not be it's going to be reserved for you, and the billing starts right from the moment you click on create. So you have reserved one instance, it's going to charge from now onwards.
Okay, but it's not possible to reserve from maybe Monday rather than from Sunday, for example.
This is what people do it in AWS. You don't have that option actually. So this is one way. And there's one more option. If you have a long-term visibility as a organization, what you can do is you can do a commitment, 1 year commitment. I'm just going to commit purchase commitment, where you're going to say 1 year. I'm going to reserve, it's going to commit that I'm going to use N number of resources. Do me the commitment, and I can get up to 57% discount. So for this, you need to do a commitment basically. 1 year or 3 year. Usually in most of the cloud, it is 1 year or 3 year. But a small distinction from AWS is, in AWS, when you do a commitment, I guess you need to do an upfront payment. But in GCP, it is not like that. You do 1 year commitment and you pay monthly. I'm not sure, they don't disclose whether there's any penalty if you break the commitment. That's not there in the this thing in the documentation, but it's monthly charge. That's a good option, I would say, compared to AWS. In AWS, it's an upfront. You need to commit it and you need to do an upfront payment. Here, it is monthly payment only. Anybody from Azure background tried this, folks? Or from AWS? This was the information which I got actually. Basically, hope my info is correct. So this is basically on your reservation part, and you can also have, when you commit it, you are saying yes, 57% is what you are going to get maximum up to because of the commitment. And this commitment, right, you as a cloud architect can suggest. You can ask the customer, what's your roadmap? If the customer says, we are just trying out GCP just to check out everything is good there or not, and we don't have any long-term vision, if they say something like that, you don't need to recommend them this option, because they don't have a commitment, they don't have a proper roadmap. But if they come from a very proper this thing, say for example, if they feel yes, GCP is the way to go, let's commit ourselves to GCP. I have seen various organizations, I guess recently I saw something like Ford and GCP have a 6-year agreement, long-term agreement. So they will do reserve it, so they're going to get a better commitment, better discount, all those things. For such kind of an organization, I recommend this option. And even questions on this can come, folks. Free trial, whether you want to use a sustained usage discount or committed usage discount. Now just think of this. A question for you people. Uh, there is a sustained use discount. That's what we see. If you use it for 30 days or 31 days continuously, you can get up to 30% discount. Committed use discount, you get up to 57% if you use it for 1 year or 3 years. Now, which option can you use with free trial, folks? Which option you can use for free trial? Absolutely. So if I just write the sustained use discount, usually called as SUD, folks. In some documentation I have seen it. So it's 30% discount for paid or free trial users, up to 30%. Committed use committed use discount, and these words, right, sometimes you may be need to remember this only from the implementation. When you're talking, maybe you may need to talk to a customer some cases. So something like a pre-sale, sometimes remembering these words would be helpful, so you can get up to 50%, so 57%, 50% discount. But commitment is 1 year or 3 years. Now, can I use this commitment for free trial, folks, with free trial account? Why not I cannot use this? Any reason? It's a simple reason, folks. Why can't I use my free trial and activate my commitment? So if it's trial means what? Okay, yes, Smith and Vivek got it correctly. It's already, so you get only free trial for 90 days. Previously it was 365 days. So this only applies for, it's a trial. So already it is free, and if you want on top of free one more free option, it's not acceptable. So and now they have reduced to 90 days, so definitely that 1 year thing is never going to come. Even if you commit it, you cannot commit it for a year. So that's the reason. Very simple way of handling it. So even if you have not looked into it, your normal exposure on these things will help you out to answer this kind of questions easily. So something on this also, more of management based questions. One or two you may get it, like how do you play a role of a manager? So how do you cross train people, or will you ask them to do live implementation? Something like that also can appear. So in this case, use a free trial is only for sustained users. If they are committing, it's going to be your commit usage discount. So that's on the reservation part. By default, it's going to be always use automatic reservation. But anyway, I don't have any reservation done, so it is of no use. This flag will not have any impact. If you want, you can turn off this one. When should you use this? You don't use is basically, assume you have already reserved it, you have kept it as a pool, but you want to create a resource, some other resource now, then you have to explicitly use don't use it, so that you don't consume from that pool. That pool is kept for some reserved purpose, where you want to do something very specific on that specific day, you can use it. So but if you have not reserved it, this has no impact. Basically, that's your reservation part. Now moving on to the next part, the startup script, and this is again only for visualization purpose only. Now, if you see startup script, you may ask, Mahesh, why there's no text box for a shutdown script? Only to make your onboarding process faster. So, and this is an important one. You may get some questions related to this also. The startup script always runs as a root or root user in Linux, or as administrator in Windows, folks. In Windows, sorry, user in Windows. So meaning You can mention any script. You don't need to have sudo kind of stuffs in Linux. So you can directly mention the command which you want. So this is an important one. Please remember it. I'm just going to put it in the tip here. Always startup script. The startup scripts execute as a root user or as administrator in Linux. I was not aware of this. So even my previous 1 year old videos, if you see, I would have put something like this. I realized this very late. So from that time onwards, I made sure that whenever I teach, I make sure I mention this very clearly. Okay. And this was one of the questions which I got in one of the interview. So later I understood that it has to be, it can be a root user, basically. So let's try to do it. It's going to be a Debian operating system. So you can use this package manager apt update. And if you're using CentOS, you have to use CentOS or Red Hat. You are going to use yum update. Your choice, which OS is your preferred one. Apt update. And I wanted to also do, yeah, this should be good enough. Let me just update it. If your requirement is to always keep the packages up to date, you can use this. And sometimes people will prefer not to have this because it may remove the, it may have some mismatch. It may have some, patches which get modified, so they may not prefer it. So if you have a requirement like this, add it. Sorry, add it if you want. I can also add something like install Apache Web Server 2, and this -y is very important because it's going to run in the background. So I have to run it in a silent mode. So no prompts, because it's going to prompt whether you want to install Apache Web Server or not. So I have to make sure I have to do -y. So you can use apt get or you can use apt-get. Both are going to be same. Modern versions of Debian and this thing, they use apt. Your choice if you want to mention it. Both are going to work the same way. All right. Now, how shutdown script we mentioned, that's the important thing. So basically, these are all going to be part of the metadata. Only for learning purpose, they have put it a UI where they are going to have a a startup script text box. You will not have a shutdown script text box here, but if you want to put it, you have to put it here. So you have to mention it like shutdown script. You have to mention it. So you have to mention this content here, what you want, or it could be you can mention a URL, shutdown script URL, gs colon, the bucket name, what's your bucket name, and something like shutdown.sh file. This is how actually you have to do it, but only for the learning purpose, to make our learning simpler, they have kept a text box where you can add your startup script. Hope that answers your question, Mishra. Vivek.
Mahesh, theoretically it's okay, but I know practically I cannot imagine means how preemptible VMs can be terminated and how we can call this shutdown script. Actually, I saw a question in which there was an option that how you can gracefully shut down your preemptible VM before termination.
So there is an option where you can simulate this entire process. There's a way where you can simulate it. Maybe next week I'll show you. So if you just search for preemptible simulate, it will show you what's going to happen when a VM is preempted, how your shutdown script is going to get executed. So you are going to get that entire stuff. You can simulate it because in reality, you will not be able to see when it's going to be preempted, when my script is going to run. So instead of that, you can simulate this. There's an option to simulate it. Maybe I can show you next week on that.
Better if you prepare some content that's because
Yeah,
we never worked upon this now, so visualization is not
sure.
happening.
Clear. There's one more question. Preemptible shutdown script can be mentioned through metadata. Yes, that's correct. Is it possible to create a template of this create instance configuration? Possible to do it, Aman. We'll come to that at a later stage. We are doing it for the first time, but you can definitely create a template that is called as instance template. We'll do that when time arises. So that's what you can do here. So I'm not going to add a shutdown script, but I'm just going to have my startup script. Maybe when we do the preemptible one, I can show you a shutdown script to dump something from memory to process something. We have to write that script basically. So that's your stuff. And in metadata, it's not only this you can add n number of stuffs, key value pair basically. This one, right, the startup script actually becomes a metadata information. So if I just click on the command line equivalent, and if I just zoom this, you see this, folks, it is part of metadata only. It's part of the metadata only, but only in the interface they have given it as a text box. Basically, everything goes as a part of metadata only here. And you can add n number of other informations in metadata. This is going to be stored in something called as metadata server. So why do you need this metadata server? If you want to programmatically access certain features, maybe say for example some specific details. I don't have an example for that. Maybe I can have something like customer ID, something like this. It could be in part of your labels also, but when you have it as a metadata server, it's going to be easy to access. So I can add something like this. So programmatically, I can call a metadata server. It's going to be like metadata.google.com. That's going to be the URL how you can evoke this, and you can access this information. If you want to do some extra work or analysis using that, this is going to be helpful. And your shutdown script, your startup script, all are going to be part of your metadata server only. Then we go to our next part, which is the availability policy, where you get this preemptibility, that PVM which we talked. That is what it's going to show. A preemptible VM costs much less, but only lasts for 24 hours. Can be terminated soon due to the system's demand. Now, before I do this, right, I just want to take a screenshot of my pricing info so that you are very clear with the preemptible VM concept. Let me take a screenshot, folks. So let me snip this. Okay, this is my current price, which is $30. Now, let me go to my pricing, the preemptibility, which is very easy, which is little difficult in AWS is what I understood. So if it is by default off, meaning it's a regular virtual machine. By default, when you create anything, it's going to be always a regular virtual machine. So if I just click on, this is what you should do always to make this VM preemptible. And this can be done only in the creation stage. Later, you cannot do it. This is permanent. You cannot do anything. So if I scroll up now, look at the details, folks. You compare it. What has been changed from the pricing perspective? What's changed, folks? When I made it as a preemptible, dollars, it came to $9 from 30. But what part has been changed is basically your only your vCPU and memory. Only your vCPU and memory. Your storage cost is going to be the same thing. And you cannot expect sustained usage discount on a preemptible VM. So it's already 80% discount. And if you still get sustained usage discount, it's not going to apply, because sustained usage discount only comes when you use the VM for almost like 30 days. So the life of this preemptible virtual machine is only 24 hours. Actually, this has to be divided by 30 if you want to get the actual 1-day cost. This is a bug in the user interface because they have generically kept it. your actual price of your preemptible is by 30. So that's the reason why you see sustained usage discount as 0. So is this clear, folks? Just wanted to wait here for your confirmation. After 24, what happens? The VM comes to a stop state. That's it. It's just come to a stop state. That's it. If you just start it again, your again billing starts. Maximum life is 24 hours. If we use Debian, is there a cost? But if we use other, will there be a cost? Yes, yes, yes. So if you use Debian, the cost is 0. But if you use something else, like Linux, sorry, Windows or Red Hat, you're going to have a cost for that also. Maybe you want to have a preemptible Windows stuff. So if I just make it like this, so if I change this, so if I choose Windows, so it's $40, $40 the usage. And if you see my preemptibility, it is per month only there. It's per month charged. Let me see whether it is okay. This is the cost. The OS cost is going to remain same as what I understand. If I just take a new screenshot, the OS cost, they are charged per month. So if I make it now preemptible on, if I see this cost is remaining the same, but this is again based on usage. 10 minutes or something is, I guess, per minute is what is going to start the billing for your Windows stuff. So if your VM after 24 hours it's shut down, so you're not going to pay it actually. So the cost is going to be lesser, a little lesser here. It's only going to be by 30 is what is your actual cost going to be. So this one is slightly, they have shown it slightly in different fashion. So it is applied for the entire month is what they are showing. Uh, if it is a local SSD, the data would be lost, Deepak. If it is a local SSD, the data is going to be lost, but what we are having is a persistent disk, which is network attached. The data will not be lost. All right, hope it's clear. Yes. And you will see, you already saw a few bugs in the system. So this has to be, if it's a preemptible, it should be per day, not per month, because the life itself is only per day. That's it. It's like our Nayak movie, 1 day CM, kind of. It's 1 day VM maximum. That's it. So if I change it back to my Linux, that's our preemptibility part. People with AWS background can comment whether this is so easy in AWS. I don't think so. My understanding was it was little difficult. So that's one thing. So if I turn it back, it's going to be called as a regular VM. So this itself, right, could be an important thing from the exam, preemptibility or non-preempt, a regular VM. So if I just look at the equivalent of it, the flag which is going to make my virtual machine preemptible or regular VM is this flag, folks. Hyphen preemptible. Very important, could be a question. Let me just add it here. Specifier flag or specifier to make GCE is this one. Make sure you add this part. This is going to make it, convert it into, or make the VM as a preemptible virtual machine, that hyphen preemptible. Certain flags are very important. That's the reason I'm putting it in the cheat sheet itself so that you can refer back. If I uncheck it, that field is going to be go off. It will go off. It's a regular VM. Now, if it's a regular VM, Google gives you two more capabilities. If you see, if I make it on host maintenance and automatic start is turned off. If it's off, you get two features. And on host maintenance is basically a very good feature, I would say. Basically, assume if you have gone to any data center, you would have seen that there'll be lots of racks, and the rack may have a maintenance. Maybe end of life, it has to be upgraded. Unfortunately, our VM is provisioned in that rack. Now, if it has to go for a maintenance, what Google will do is Google will quietly, silently move from that rack to from rack 1 to rack 2, and you will not even notice that. So it's going to be totally transparent to the end user. So this is a very good feature. In other cloud also you get this. Yeah, Google provides you this feature also. So this is usually called as live migration. Live migration, where you move from one rack in the same data center to another rack. So no downtime. So you will not even see any downtime. So this is like the cloud provider's secret sauce. Zero downtime. And if the VM is having local SSD, if the VM is having GPUs, then you have to do it slightly different. But if it's not having GPUs and local SSD, live migration is totally transparent, and they don't even intimate you that there's going to be a hardware maintenance. That's a cool feature which you get. And why GPU and local SSD are going to have an impact? Because these are attached locally to the system. It is attached locally to the system. That's where you have to handle it slightly different. If it's not having any local attachment, then it can be easily migrated. So this is highly recommended, and it is totally free of cost. When I turn this off, meaning when there's a host maintenance, it's going to get terminated. The recommended option is to have migrate your VM. So when you do this, the cost is going to be remain the same. So no difference. So it's highly recommended you turn this on, so that if there's any hardware maintenance they are doing, you will not have any impact. It's going to continue working and zero downtime basically. The next option which you get is basically automatic restart. Here, this on host maintenance, or sometimes called as live migration, this is Google has some hardware maintenance. So this is the cloud provider maintenance work, and that's the reason they give you this option, seamless migration to another rack. There could be sometimes due to some software glitch or something due to a hardware failure, which was unexpected failure in the data center, the system may go down. So what Google recommends is do an automatic restart. So if that fix is done, all your VMs are going to come up automatically. So if it's a single virtual machine, it's always recommended you do on host maintenance as migrate, restart, automatic restart as on. And this is totally free of cost. The first one is maintained, or something like I would say like planned maintenance, which Google does. This one is ad hoc, which goes due to some unexpected failures. You can have the VM come up. Once it is fixed, it's going to come up there. So that's your two options. These are something which you get under your main management tab. The next one is regarding the security. So under security, you have some limited steps only, not much. The first one is shielded VM. If your image is shielded, you get these options. Secure boot, you can turn on secure boot. This way you are very much sure that your system is not compromised by malwares, kernel level malwares or rootkits. So then you can have this virtual TPM, trusted platform, virtual trusted platform. So this is going to basically I have not explored this much to a great extent. So this is going to be helpful for IoT based devices. You can use this to some great extent, and you have some integrated monitoring capability. So these are something which you get when you have a shielded VM. If you don't have a shielded VM, for example, very few VMs are unshielded these days in GCP. If I uncheck this, it's a normal VM. So if I have a normal VM, the shielded VM capable, secure boot, all those things are going to be disabled. So let's go with shielded. It's better protection there. Then you have those options when you turn on those things. So you want secure boot, turn it on. And these are all free of cost. The next thing is, if it's a Linux machine, you can have your public SSH key added. You add it, you want to block it, you can do those things basically. And I can show a bug in the user interface. SSH is for what? Only for Linux machines, right? If I change this OS to Windows also, I will still see that. So I can still see that. So if I just select it, I'll see this. So which is not applicable itself, right? An SSH key for a Windows machine does not make any sense. This is a known bug. If somebody asks you, you can say it's a bug. So just wanted to make sure that you are aware of it. There's one question from Smith. Previously, there used to be a checkbox for shielded VM, right? Yes, Smith. So previously, when it was in beta, right, you had an option to select few things. Now it is made as mandatory. Most of them are shielded. So you don't have an option. So you will by default, most of the time when you create it, it's going to be always shielded. Smith. Previously, it was having like that. Even I had a video. So in that, it was slightly the user interface keeps changing, folks. So that was a good observation, Smith. So this is under your security part. Moving on to the disk part. This is where you can add n number of data disk. So this is where you can add also your local SSD. So let's go with the first option, deletion rule. This is basically what it indicates. It's delete the boot disk when the instance is deleted. If I uncheck this, what happens is, if I delete my VM, only my vCPU and memory is removed. My data is going to be still there. My storage, what I kept in my boot disk is still going to be there. So a few of you were asking, right? How can I restore it? Can I delete if it's not responding? Yes, you can delete your VM, attach it to something else easily. So make sure you uncheck this before deleting the VM. So this is an important flag. By default, it's going to be deleting your boot disk. Why that by default is always deleting the boot disk is, it is based on, you can take it as a compliance part. So just take, you have provisioned this virtual machine in European Union where they are bound by this GDPR stuff. Now, if you delete a VM and if you have done something like this, there's a disk which is hanging around, which is not attached to anything, and it may have some sensitive information. GDPR in very simple terms is, if you delete it, it should be completely deleted. It should not be a partial delete. In very, very simple terms. What you have done now is a partial delete. The CPU memory has been gone, but the data is still there. It could be a issue. So to avoid those things, you get this feature of deleting it completely. And this could be also a possible question, a flag, which is going to be important for this. So what is that flag which is going to decide whether the disk should be deleted or not? So by default, it is always checked. If it is default checked, nothing required. If you uncheck it, the flag is going to be called as no boot disk auto delete. This is the flag which is going to decide whether the boot disk should be retained or not. Will delete, I'll format it later, will delete the boot disk automatically if VM is deleted. Meaning if you don't want to delete it, it should be boot disk, there's no equivalent of it. So the equivalent, if I see for it, if I uncheck it, they don't show that option. If that flag is there, sorry, if the flag is there, if I add it, go to my command line equivalent, I'll not have that option. I'll not have that option. If you mention that flag, it's going to delete it, basically. That's your boot disk behavior. Now, what we'll do, and one important thing with the boot disk, any storage when it comes to Google, right? This is a very cool feature, folks. They do the encryption turned on for you automatically, which is not the case with AWS. When you create a boot disk for an EC2 instance, people can comment on it if I'm wrong here. If you create a boot disk, you have to explicitly turn on encryption for your boot disk. For data disk, it may be automatic. For boot disk, they don't turn it on. You need to turn on by a checkbox there. But in Google, it is by default turned on. And the type of encryptions which you get are three types. Google managed key, meaning Google generates the key, they manage it, they use it to decrypt it and encrypt. Everything fully managed by Google. You don't need to even think of it. This is going to apply very well for a startup where they don't have a manpower to do all those things. The second option is customer managed key. Sorry, customer managed key, where you are going to generate as a customer a key and keep the key in KMS, which is a key management service. So you generate the key, keep it in Google Cloud itself, and keep it, and you reference it when you want to encrypt and decrypt it. This is the second option. The third option is you supply the key as a customer, and the key is not in GCP, it is somewhere in your on-premise, or it could be in other cloud. So three different ways of doing it. If you think somewhere there's a thought as a customer, the cloud support engineers may access my data. If you have that thought, it's not going to happen. But if you have that kind of a thought, or if the regulations are very strict, you can go with this last option. But if it's a simple standard application, no need of too much of overhead, just go with Google Managed Encryption. Okay, so we'll talk as we progress more on this part. Since because it was coming at the storage, I thought of sharing it with you. So this is your boot disk. Now it's highly recommended you keep this boot disk only for OS level stuff. It's like your C drive. Don't install anything extra. But most of our demos, we will install it in here only for simplicity reason. So where should you install? Usually the data is in a data disk. Add a new drive or a new disk basically. So add a disk. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add all the 4 types of disk which we are going to get. Basically, standard persistent disk PD, standard persistent disk. Yes, standard persistent disk. Then we'll talk about snapshot at a later point of time. Don't worry. So it's going to be a blank disk. Read and write. By default, whenever you add a disk, right, the behavior of this disk is to keep it. Even when you delete the VM, the disk should be kept because this is a data disk, right? This is a default behavior. So disk should be kept. If it's a boot disk, it's going to be deleted. If it's a data disk, they keep it. Maybe you want to attach this disk to some other VM. So that is the whole purpose. So if you want to explicitly delete it, then you have to look for this command line, which is going to show basically auto delete S. This is the command. So if you don't mention it, it's going to be auto delete no. Basically, this is for your data disk. I'll format it after the class, a data disk. So let me add the disk, folks. Standard persistent. It went standard persistent, and you can start with minimum 10. It has to be 10. It cannot be less than 10. Minimum 10 is what is required. And I'm going to share you a small cheat sheet on these things. What should be the minimum, maximum, all those things, so that you can keep it as a handy material. So what I'm going to use 365 GB. Why? I'll mention that in a minute. why I'm going with 375 GB of storage. So when I put that of storage, right, this is what your input output operations per second gives you. Basically, you can have 281 read, 562 write operations, and this is your throughput. So limited. And when you have a disk storage, right, encryption automatically comes. The encryption feature which we saw previously was for our boot disk, which is a standard persistent disk. Now this is a data disk. Even for that, we have an encryption option. Good. That's our first data disk. Let me add one more data disk. This one, we will call this as SSD persistent disk. Okay. SSD PD. The same thing, same encryption, same stuff is going to apply. And I'm going to go with 375 GB. So 375 GB is what I'm going to put one more time. Look at this input output operations, folks. Where was persistent disk, standard one? Around 300. Here it is 100 and like 10,000 or 11,000 read operations, 9,000 write operations. Very, very high. So very high. The same thing applies for your encryption. So whenever you have a better input, you need a high IOPS requirement, go with SSD persistent disk. So let me add this. There's a question. Let me finish this and answer this. Let me add one more disk. This time I'm going to call this as balanced persistent disk. Balanced persistent disk. Balanced PD. The same number 375. When I do this, you see this, folks, it's not so high as your SSD, not low as your standard persistent disk. It's in between. I would say more towards your standard, but better than standard persistent disk. And the same thing applies. So this is your same encryption stuffs, all those things applies. Done. And these are all network attached. Let me add the last disk, which is local SSD. So local SSD, sometimes they call this as scratch disk also, folks. So if you look into any Coursera materials or anything, they usually call this as scratch disk. Both are same. So now I'll choose this as local SSD. Local SSD. Then each disk, right, can be fixed to each disk. You can go up to 24. 24 into 375 is going to be around 9 terabytes. So you can have 9 terabytes of local SSD in a virtual machine. So one disk can be of 375. This was the reason why I chose 375, so that we can compare what's going to be the highest price, what's going to be the cheapest price when it comes to these data disk. That was the reason why I used the same number everywhere. And for your surprise, look at this IOPS requirement. Awesome. You cannot get it in any of those three options which we saw, because they were all network attached. Only when you have a local attachment, right, your IOPS is going to be so high. 90,000 write operation, 170K read operation, very, very high. So I will have very less latency, better throughput. So 4 disk is what we have added. Now if I just go up and look into my pricing, you'll have a better idea. So the first one is 50. This is our boot disk. Ignore this. The next one is our standard persistent disk, 60K. If it is SSD persistent disk, it is 70K. Your balanced one, it's between your standard and SSD, 41. Local SSD, it's going to be cheaper, but it is attached to the virtual machine. So if the data is lost, you cannot do anything there. So this is your pricing, just to give you a pricing. So the highest one is always going to be your network attached. Why? It is attached to a network. Reliability is there. Local SSD, the reliability is not there. So if you delete the data, it's gone. And even if you go to your local SSD, right, there are a few questions. I'll stop it and answer it now. So when you go to local SSD, you nowhere see any encryption capability. So by default, it's going to be Google managed. If it's local SSD, you don't get those two more options, customer managed and customer supplied with a local SSD. So the highest one is always SSD persistent disk when it comes to price wise. IOPS wise, the best is local SSD, but you have their its own drawbacks basically. Now let me stop it here, folks. There are a few questions. Let me answer it. But the data will not be recovered if we use local SSD. Yes, your requirement is not so easily. Usually what you should do is, Mangesh, it's something like this. You have a local SSD. You do some processing with that disk because you have that high input output operation requirement. You do all those things. In the same VM, you should have a persistent disk. Once everything is processed, you transfer that from that disk to this persistent disk. That way the data is persistent. If by any chance the data, the virtual machine crashes also, the data is there. So you have to do this planning basically. So, but the IOPS which you get is very high. You saw it by yourself. So that's how you are going to manage it basically, Mangesh. Hope that answers your question. There's one more question. Is it possible to configure local SSD to another region or availability zone? You can have a different local SSD, but you cannot map the same local SSD to another zone because this is attached to a virtual machine. You cannot do it. But different local SSD, you can provision it basically.
What I means replicate. Is it possible
No,
to replicate the local SSD?
no.
Oh, but in the best
So
practice, we can use a local SSD for a OS disk, right?
no, you cannot use
Like a
for
best.
OS disk also. That's the reason when you saw
Mhm.
when you were provisioning the disk, right? Local, the boot disk. When we saw this, you will not have a local SSD. So it's not a good practice to use local SSD for your boot disk. It has to be a network attached because something can crash, go off. If it is goes means the data is wiped off. Your OS details will be wiped off. So never use local SSD for boot disk. Only when you have that IOPS requirement, go for local SSD. Otherwise, always prefer to use SSD. Hope that answers your question, Vijay. Then.
What is throughput, Manish?
So when you do this, how fastly you can able to get your data, right? So how much data you can handle it, basically. That's what going to be your throughput. Basically, if you have a requirement, usually for database, there's going to be a good requirement of throughput. Read, write, how fastly I can get. So how many data I can insert, how many data I can get it. So that's going to be a throughput.
Okay, okay, good.
So there's one more question. Yeah, done. So, and we are not going to provision all this SSD, all those things, because it's going to cost me $200. I just wanted to give you that idea of which one is going to be expensive, which one is going to be cheaper, all those details by putting the same number. And why I use 375 GB is one local SSD can always have minimum 375 GB. That's the minimum you can have. Persistent disk can be minimum as 10. Now if I put it as 10, right, it's not an apple to apple comparison, right? I kept the same size throughout, but I compared it with the price and the IOPS. So now you have a better clarity which one is the best. IOPS wise, reliability wise, durability wise, SSD persistent disk is going to be better basically. Okay, there's one more question. So for syncing a local SSD to persistent, hope we need to write an application API to code or it is correct. No need of an application or anything. So simple, have a shell script, folks. It's in the virtual machine, right? From the virtual machine, there's a disk which is local SSD. From that disk, you do a copy. CP command is good enough to copy. No need of any application APIs or anything. Simple shell script is good enough or a batch script. That's it. So don't try to make it so much complicated. So always think this is going to be definitely a simple option. I can make it, I can write it with an API, all those things, but it's going to be a complicated one. All right. So I'm just going to delete it, folks, because I don't have that much of budget to have this stuff. So I just wanted to show you that part basically. That's on your disk. Done. So that's our disk part. That's our disk part. I guess we have hit our time. So we have 2 more tabs to cover. I'll just cover it. I'll just take 5 minutes, folks, so that we can cover this part. Networking. This is something which we are going to keep it very light. Only one information which I wanted to share is when you create a project, when you enable your compute engine API, you're going to have one VPC or one network created called as default. That is what we are going to use, and more on this networking part in our module 5. Many of us are not so comfortable. So many batches which I have run. So based on that understanding, I feel not everybody is going to be comfortable from day one. So we'll slightly keep it light. So this is a network which is already created for us. So we don't need to worry about it. Let's leave it as is. And the last option which you get is sole tenancy. So this is basically everything in GCP is virtualized. But if you see, go to the data center, you'll see physical servers, right? Bare metals. So in some cases, there could be a requirement where you wanted to use the entire node for yourself, for your own organization. By default, when you provision a virtual machine, right? Let me just get a small screenshot. Sole tenancy, sole, yeah. This is a awesome. So more than me explaining, the diagram explains it by itself. So basically what we do is, this is the normal way. You have a node. Node is nothing but a bare metal, a complete bare metal. So you have a node where uh, it's a multi-tenancy model, meaning VM1 belongs to customer 1, VM2 belongs to customer 2, VM3 belongs to customer 3. And VM1 and VM2 will never interact each other. They have a isolation, a network isolation. So they will never interact each other, but they are using the same host or node. It is like our apartments or condos. The same infrastructure, the same foundation is used. But if there is a requirement for your, based on your customer requirement, where the entire node has to be dedicated for one customer, that's your sole tenant model. It's a single tenant model. It's like your independent house is what you will have. So this could be little expensive because you get the complete node. If you reserve the complete node, whether you use it or not, you're going to get a bill. And you can have one powerful virtual machine, or you can have multiple virtual machines, but everything belongs to the same customer. Now you have no single doubt that my data is going to be seen by another customer. Just think of some competitors, both competitors on the same cloud. For example, two telecom providers on the same cloud. People may think the data can get shared. Usually it will not, but if you have that small doubt, go for sole tenant model. It's a single tenant model, and that's what you get it in this tab option. So you can have up to, I would say, 96 vCPU, 600 to 624 GB of RAM easily with sole tenancy. So that's the option, and we cannot leverage it in a free trial because that much we cannot provision. So it's not a private cloud, it is public cloud, but that node is allocated to you. Nobody else will be able to provision anything. There's one node which has been allocated to customer 1, Aman. It's not a private cloud, it's still public cloud only. GCP, AWS, all those are private clouds. All right, so that brings us to all the stuffs which we have done here. Now if I click on the command line, you'll see two command lines. The first one is a very big command line, which is basically to create a virtual machine with a startup script, with a firewall rule, all those things. The second one is basically, it creates a firewall rule for us. G-Cloud compute firewall rules create. Because we have a web server, right? That is the reason. That's it. So if this is not, If this firewall rule is not created, we will not be able to access it. So this command is going to come handy when you just check that box. So if I just go and uncheck, so if I uncheck this, that firewall, that command is not going to be there. Basically, you have to go manually and create a firewall rule. Now to make our onboarding process faster, we'll just use hello HTTP. That's it. Click on create. When I click on create, I'll have a virtual machine and it's going to have a web server built in, Apache web server built in, because I have put it in the startup script. Once the system comes up, those two scripts are going to run, those commands, apt update and apt install apache 2 -y. It's going to come up. So let's just wait. I'll just show you the VM. This is my IP address, external IP address. Not working because the script did not up. Now it worked. So it's just going to take a little bit time to come up. So this is my Apache web server. So you can also give a try. It should going to be, you should be able to see it. If you are using your home Wi-Fi, if you are using something from your corporate VPN or anything, because it's non-secure, it's HTTP, not HTTPS, it may block you. But if you're using your home Wi-Fi, no VPN, you should be able to access it. So this is our first VM which we created, and we went through the complete details of all the features when you're provisioning the virtual machine. So we'll stop it here. I can take questions for the next 10 minutes. My throat is already gone, but I'll try to take for 10 minutes if you have any questions. So we'll stop it here. Folks who want to drop off, if you have a hard stop, you can drop off. Look for the recordings in the next 3 to 4 hours in the same playlist. I'll also drop you a mail once it is uploaded, processed. If you have a hard stop, you can drop off. If you have any questions, I can answer it, folks, right now. If you don't have any questions, have a rest of the week wonderful week. There's one question. Could you please explain the typical enterprise dev production VM configuration which you use or came across? Very good question, Sripal. So the reality is this one is what I have seen. If I click on create a VM, so usually in enterprises, right, I will never use custom like I'll never use N1 series only. This is what I have seen. So N1 series, most of the learning we will use this one, but we'll never use N1 series. Why? I'll tell you. First of all, N1 series is little weird series. The reason is you will see the versions, the combination. No other cloud provider has this combination. One vCPU, 3.75 GB. Usually what we have learned in our engineering and all is the RAM is going to be always multiples of 4 or multiples of 8. But Google has a weird combination here, 3.75. Where is that 2.25 GB of RAM? So what Google gives is they use it for their maintenance of this VM, all those things, they consume it. So you get what you exactly want. So is what they mentioned. So usually when you do a enterprise on-prem to GCP migration, you will avoid basically this N1 series. Most of the time, either you will use custom so that you will have that number match, something like if it's 4 vCPU, usually it's going to be 16 GB of RAM, not 15. So this is what you are going to do most of the time. This is one thing which you are going to use in enterprise, or you will use basically N2 series. N2 series is very perfect. So you get a general combinations which you want. This is something which I have seen works very well across enterprise, Shripal. Apart from that, most of the implementations which I have done is on Kubernetes. So where we don't much focus on the configurations, all those things, but we rather focus on the containers there. But this machine type is an important thing because it controls uh, the clock and your vCPU and memory configuration. This is something which I have used basically, which I have come across in my experience, Shripal. There's one more question. Is it possible to share me some sample design documents or sample proposal documents. I don't, okay, because it is done for a few organizations, I don't have any copy. But if you want some sample design document, right, the best option I would say is just search for GCP icons. I'm not sure whether I shared this information on the first day. If you just go to GCP icons, you'll get a PPT, a Google slide. Just open this Google slide. There are a good amount of available. Architectures available. You can use this as your reference architecture. Uh, but proposal documents, you will not get it. But if you get a chance to work with any Google partners, they will have access to something called as partner portal, and they can get some copies for you usually. So, but outside it's going to be difficult. So it has to be coming either from Google customer engineers, partner engineers, or from Google authorized partners. Vijay, I don't have anything. Whatever I created it, I had to leave it in the organization before I leave the organization. So you know the policies, right?
Oh,
So this is
yeah.
something which
No,
can
I
be
just
helpful.
I just asking about this, any template kind of thing is available.
This
Document.
template, okay,
Yeah.
this one, if you look into it, you okay, the template also,
No, I
right?
know that.
They have it.
I,
The template also, they have it. I have seen it because I have filled in those templates when I have created a proposal. So uh, usually you will have it,
actually,
but
I have.
from if, yeah.
Okay. No, actually, in Azure and the AWS, I'll get it,
They have
but
it.
GCP, yeah, GCP, I
No,
didn't
is
know,
that
did not
template
able
available?
to.
Is that template they provide
No,
it in their website itself?
no. My organization is there, so for me, it is easily,
Okay,
modify the
internal.
existing one. So
Oh,
GCP,
okay, okay,
I don't have that. So
okay. So maybe if there's a COE kind of a stuff or something, they usually create a template. So something which is it's going to be
okay,
case by case basis only. Yeah. But what you can do is basically
yeah,
use the
some little.
existing AWS. Yeah.
Okay, okay, got it.
Any other questions,
And
folks? I can.
Magesh,
Yeah.
when you're planning to take that Kubernetes, which module?
So it's going to be next week, Saturday and Sunday is going to be still compute engine. So it's going to be the
Okay,
Kubernetes is going to start after we finish compute engine. So 13th and 14th is going to be compute engine only. 20th is what we are going to start Kubernetes concept. Or 14th
okay,
towards the end we may have a start, but more on 20th February.
okay. Thanks,
So
Magesh.
on 14th, I will indicate you to look into some documentation. So there are some documentation where you can prepare. If you are okay to look into it right now, there is some documentations already where you can, maybe I'll share you that link directly for you people. So it should be in, let me just check it. Module 3, 1 minute. Let me unshare it.
And also the cheat sheet is updated, right, in the PDF one. So
Yeah,
whatever updated,
it's,
automatically update in.
yeah. Yes. It is updated, and the one which we are creating every day or every weekends is going to be always available in a document form, Word document form.
Okay.
So I just share it back. So if I just go to my the drive which you have, so under compute, there are a few articles called as container basic. This is the PDF document, folks. If you can go through it, maybe from today onwards, in 2 weeks you will have some good idea. So it's just going to take you 1 hour or so. Prerequisites, that's it. Because containers are slightly difficult, so if you have heard of this, prepared yourself, you will be having a better session there basically. So this is something which you can start looking into it. On 20th February we'll talk more on this prerequisite. I would say this is the only one which requires prerequisite. None of the other modules requires any prerequisite. Any other questions, folks?
Magesh, can I drop Magesh?
Sorry.
Can I drop?
No, the session is stopped at 10:05. I stopped. That's what I told. So if you have a hard stop, you can drop. So there's any question, last minute questions, I'd like to answer it. That's it. You can drop off if you don't have any questions. Any other questions, folks? I can take one or two if you have.
Sir, actually, I'm not aware of the SAN. I understand the NAS part, but how SAN differ from NAS? I
Okay,
know it's
so
out of.
yeah, go ahead, Anil.
So I know it's out of course, but SAN is not clear to me, and I'm not able to visualize. But how it differs from NAS and how where it can help us in infrastructure topology.
Okay, so I guess I had sent you one small link in the chat. Look into this first. It gives you a better idea about the stuff, how it works. And I also, to be very frank, don't come from a storage background. So in simple terms, you do this mapping. So if it is a SAN, it maps to persistent disk only, what we saw just now. If it is a NAS, it maps to something called as file store.
Yeah. NAS is
File
clear,
stores.
but NAS is
Yeah.
clear. SAN was not clear to me till now.
Okay, SAN
Yeah.
here, they have a explanation. Look into it. In GCP, it's going to make it very simple in GCP. Like I have heard of this because I have done some little hardware sizing when I worked in one organization. So they used to always say, for this software to run, you should have a SAN storage. So was not aware of much about it, but when I came to learn GCP, so that's where I understood you can use persistent disk itself as SAN, basically SAN storage. That's the equivalent here when it comes, because at the end, when they do want to do a migration from on-prem to GCP, what is the mapping you need? That's what's going to be important there.
Okay.
So I'll also check it out. I'll not explore much on SAN. I can explore it and I can share you maybe next week.
Sure.
It's more of searching it out. That's it.
Sure.
But in GCP, it's basically persistent disk. And you can call me Mahesh. The sir looks very odd. And you can call me Mahesh.
Okay.
All right.
Mahesh, where is this container basics? I'm
Okay.
not
If you
able to
go to your
locate.
module 3, Mohammed, you see module 3, right? In your Google Drive.
Let me see.
You have 1 week time. So, but
Okay.
slide by slide, or
Yeah.
it's only, yeah, you should be able to get it. Container basics. It basically some links, some small concepts basically. And I'll cover it everything from the basic. But if you listen it to twice from 2 different people, so there are some YouTube videos, something which I'm going to also start. It's going to become very clear. So instead of coming with blank, you are going to have some backup for your information. That's it.
So I'm pretty much new to this container stuff, and
No worries, no worries. You can look into it. So I'll start with very, very basic. So that's the reason it's going to take 2 weeks to progress with Kubernetes itself. First, we'll understand what is container. Then only we'll come to Kubernetes. We'll not directly jump into Kubernetes itself. One class is only for containers.
I don't see that in my drive.
Are you seeing, first of all these folders? Are you
No, I
seeing this
don't see
folder?
that.
No, not in your drive. So there will be a link which I'll click on this link. Click on this link.
Okay, yeah. Now I'm able to see it. Okay.
It may not be in your drive. It is my drive which I've shared it with you.
Okay.
So you should usually share shared with me option. Then you'll see it. So
Yeah, that's what I checked it. Shared it with me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe
All
this
right,
link and your YouTube playlist, bookmark it somewhere. YouTube playlist and this Google Drive. This is going to be lifetime access for you people. If you forget it, you can drop me a mail. I'll send you the link. But if you can bookmark it, it's going to be always handy. Module 3 is where you will have that for this.
Okay.
All right, folks. Let's stop it here.
Thank you, Magesh. Yeah.
Magesh.
Yeah.
Magesh.
Yeah, Vijay.
Actually, I don't have access this Google Drive. That's what I asked. I sent request.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Okay.
just sent request.
I'll make a note of this. Okay, I'll make a note. Okay, so I'll check it, Vijay. I'll make a note. I'll
The
check
link
it
which you
right
ping.
away. So, oh,
Yeah.
it's showing totally access denied. Okay, 1 minute, folks, 1 minute.
Yeah,
So the link which I clicked, right? So it has my, it has to be something like, because I have multiple emails. The email which you gave, Vijay. So Vijay, your email.
Maybe. Yeah, same
Yeah.
ID
So
only.
just check. Okay, let me check it. Maybe I'll remove it and add it back again. Maybe if some access issues there, I'll check it out.
Okay.
I'll send you
That's
an
the
email.
reason I asked updated or because I thought.
Okay. Fine. I'll check it right away after the class.
Okay. Thanks, Nagesh. After checking, just drop a
Sure.
note. I
I'll
will.
drop your mail. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Nagesh.
All right, folks. We'll stop it here. See you on next Saturday with more further concepts on compute engine. All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.